What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto was the one everyone regretted abandoning when he became the storm that shattered nations? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments, and also check the description box to original creator of this beautiful creation. The Retrieval team that was made up of Nara Shikamaru, Alif Chunin, Hyuga Neji, Akamichi Choji, Uzumaki Naruko, Rock Lee and Inazuka Kiba, all Leaf Genin, had succeeded in retrieving the most recent traitor of the Hidden Leaf Village, Uchiha Sasuke, for Konohamaru no Sato. Sasuke was injured, but compared to Naruko's, who defeated him in his curse-marked state, Sasuke's injuries were like comparing a light scrape from falling on pavement to a large scar. Naruko had two huge slowly healing scars from the two Chidori strikes Sasuke had struck her within a few large cuts on her hips and arms. The whole team had been returned at various points of the mission with small or life-threatening injuries from their respective fights with Otogakure's Sound 5. Lee had a few cuts. Neji and Choji were critically injured, Neji having had a large hole tore through his shoulder and several stab wounds in his back, and Choji being highly malnourished from eating his family's pills. Shikamaru managed to return with just a broken finger. Kiba was suffering from a self-inflicted stab wound to his stomach. Naruko was in the worst condition, but most of it wasn't visible thanks to the demon fox, Kyuubi, sealed inside her gut. Sasuke had a half-strength Rasengan rammed through his chest, and a couple of cuts and broken bones. Naruko had far more broken bones than Sasuke, two full-powered Chidoris to her torso and more cuts. Naruko's sensei Taki Kakashi found her in the middle of her struggle back to the village while carrying her deserter of a teammate, and the white-haired Junin had carried her along with the traitor all the way back to Konoha on his back, while the medics carried the rest of the team. When they arrived at the Hokage Tower, Shikamaru reported the mission a success for the capture of Sasuke and defeat of the ones aiding him in his escape, while Kakashi carried his two injured students to the treatment ward, handing Naruko off to Shizune at the entrance. Sasuke, the village's precious last Uchiha, was strapped to a bed immediately and his wounds taken care of while he was still unconscious. Naruko was forced to walk back home and treat herself when the medic Shizune left in charge refused the demon brat any treatment, though a nice young male medic with brown hair and orange eyes did give her a first aid pouch and directions of what to do. On the way, she ran into her last teammate, Sakura Haruno. While walking to her rundown apartment, she put up a smile so Sakura could see that she had succeeded in retrieving their AWOL teammate. "You did it, Naruko. You got Sasuke-kun back," Sakura asked happily, her eyes filling with glee. "That's right, Sakura-chan, I always keep my promises, and I never go back on my word no matter what, cause that's my ninja way," Naruko declared. "Can I go see Sasuke-kun yet?" Sakura asked, her eyes already assuming their far-off glazed look of her imagining Sasuke finally accepting her proposal for a date, or maybe, their marriage and the children they would have together. "Yeah, but I think that he's asleep right now," Naruko said as she continued down the road towards her small apartment to patch up her wounds, while Sakura didn't give any of the blood on her kunoichi teammate or the blonde's limp a single thought and bolted down the road towards the hospital at speeds not seen before from the Pinkette. 2 days later, the minimally injured members of the Sasuke retrieval team gave the report to Tsunade. Naruko was waiting for her silver-haired Cyclopean sensei and conscious teammate at the bridge of the training grounds that was their usual meeting place. Her face formed into a smile when her pink-haired teammate Sakura came running towards the bridge. Naruko was going to give a cheerful wave until she saw her teammate's face. Sakura had a dark snarl form on her face when she caught sight of her blonde kunoichi teammate. "Uzumaki Naruko, you fucking bitch. I thought you were his best friend. How could you hurt him so horribly? It's a miracle all his limbs are intact," Sakura screeched as she began raging over Sasuke's delicate health from when she saw him strapped to the bed in the hospital. "But, Sakura-chan, he hurt me in the fight too," Naruko said as she moved to show Sakura her own injuries, when the pinkhead exploded in a screaming rage. "Never call me that again, you demon whore. You hurt Sasuke-kun so much that he's still unconscious. You're conscious. Your wounds are nothing compared to Sasuke-kun's. I wish you were fucking dead, you piece of slutty demonic trash. Don't ever come near me or Sasuke-kun again, you demon." The enraged Pinkhead roared as she slugged her injured blonde teammate across the face. Naruko's smile quickly turned into a grimace full of pain as her back struck the railing of the bridge, opening one of her Chidori wounds and causing fresh blood to flow, drenching the front of her orange jumpsuit and causing her to scream as a fresh wave of pain washed over her. Tears sprung from the blonde's eyes as she dodged a powerful kick aimed for her chest from the one she thought would be a good friend. Naruko quickly turned away from the bridge and ran away from her attacker. She didn't care anymore about missing the team meeting as tears fell from her face while she ran towards her apartment, never noticing her sensei appearing on the bridge as she turned the corner. That night, Tsunade sighed as she took another swig of her 10th sake bottle as she signed yet another document of the piles of paperwork on her desk. She had been having an already hectic day with the civilian and elder councils yelling at her about how she should kill the demon brat for the large injuries inflicted upon their precious Uchiha, even though the Uchiha only had minor wounds compared to the young Uzumaki. The busty blonde moaned slightly as she picked up another piece of paper and stared at it through her drunken glazed-over stupor. She sighed with a hiccup as she signed the paper and placed the Hokage's seal on the paper. The blonde Cage hiccuped again before she tossed the paper onto one of the many stacks, not bothering to read it all the way. If she had, she would have noticed the lines of indefinite banishment of Uzumaki Naruko for assault upon fellow Leaf Shinobi, written in bold on the top of the paper. Hokage's office next day. Tears were streaming down her whiskered face from Naruko's wide eyes as she stared at her mother figure and the three elders standing in front of her. Her dream to become the Hokage had just been smashed to pieces by what the elder Homura read to her. She had to leave the village and could never be Hokage to finally be respected like she had long dreamed. In addition, she could no longer be a shinobi because of the new seals a sympathetic Neko masked Anbu was drawing on the back of her hands that would make sure that she would never be able to use any ninjutsu or genjutsu again either. Tsunade was standing in front of her desk, staring at the girl that she considered a younger sister or daughter stone-faced as her two advisors. Homura and Kaharu informed Kakashi and the younger blonde of the punishment for her crimes, as they put it, making the Cyclopean pissed, especially after finding out why his blonde student had skipped the team meeting the day before. One Uzumaki Naruko, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, is to be banished from the great village of Konohagakure no Sato and the Land of Fire immediately, and she is to be stripped of her ability to use ninjutsu and genjutsu of any kind, as well as being stripped of her summoning contract with the Toads as given to her by the Toad sage Jiraiya. She will leave the village tomorrow morning at the first signs of the rising sun, where we'll announce her banishment to the rest of his village. If she refuses to leave, all shinobi of the village are permitted to kill her on sight. Homura said in a monotone voice, as he read from the banishment slip. He mentally sighed while he had nothing against the girl, having been Kushina's sensei during the Third and Second War. He was forced to see the dangers she presented to the village via the Akatsuki and how the rest of the village would act once they found out about the Uchiha's injuries. Naruko, Kakashi said as he choked up, his lone eye beginning to tear up. I'm so sorry. He never got to finish as the blonde turned away from them and ran from the office, tears streaming through the air behind her. Tsunade excused the elders and Kakashi from her office and sat behind her desk as she stared at the 4 pictures on the wall hollowly, taking a sip of her sake bottle. She sighed as she felt like the pictures of the previous cages were glaring at her in disappointment, especially Minato and Hashirama's pictures. Naruko's apartment, an hour later. Naruko just finished packing what few belongings she owned in her small, rundown apartment and decided to begin heading to the gates of the village, when suddenly Konohamaru and his small gang knocked excitedly on her ex-apartment's door, prompting the young depressed girl to open the dent-riddled door. "Hey Ne-san," Konohamaru yelled, having finally escaped Uruka's boring lectures for the day with Moegi and Udon. "Wanna come play ninja with us?" "Sorry Kono-chan, but I have to tell you something important." Naruko replied with a sad tone that caught the immediate attention of her 3 little cohorts in the crime known as pranks. "What is it, boss?" Konohamaru asked in slight concern as he looked at his older sister figure, finally noticing the sadness etched into her usually joy-filled face. "I have been banished from the village for the injuries Sasuke was brought back in. I can't come back after tomorrow morning." Naruto stuttered as she tried to keep her tears from falling anew. "What? I'll friggin' kill whoever did this." Konohamaru roared in absolute anger that made the angry form of his late grandfather, the Sandame, look tame. Scaring a few civilians that were walking along the road, Moegi and Udon both wore an expression of inconceivable rage at the news they had just been told, especially to find out that it had been their respective grandparent to issue the banishment. "Calm down, Kono-chan," Naruko said softly as she placed her hand on her surrogate brother's shoulder. "Calm down. How can you expect me to be anywhere near calm? You just got banished from the village by those retards on the council and that old bitch of a hag, Ne-san." Konohamaru yelled as he looked set to murder every civilian on the council for banishing one of the only family members he had left besides Asuma and Kurenai. Yes, he knew about the two. He lived in the same damn house as them after all, and they were hardly quiet in their nightly activities. "It's because there is nothing I can do about any of it, Kono-chan. Besides, I guess I already saw this coming," Naruko said, confusing her little friends. "The councils have always hated me, so I'm guessing that whether or not I was able to bring Sasuke Teme back, they would have probably still banished me either way," Naruko said as she then pulled her leaf headband that she had received from Iruka from her forehead and placed it around Konohamaru's head, tying it into place before leaning back to take in the image of Konohamaru wearing her headband. "I am no longer a kunoichi of Konohagakure, tell that to anyone who actually cared enough," Naruko said as she closed the door to her apartment for the last time and rubbed the three heads of the Konohamaru core members, before she turned and walked towards the northern gate of the village. Once she reached the gate, she got a pair of salutes from the two eternal gate chunin, Azumo and Katetsu, both of whom always enjoyed her pranks, as she started walking past only to be stopped by her old classmates and their senseis. The only ones to not show was Sakura and Ino, who were visiting their precious Uchiha, and Team 8 that was out on a mission. Mostly all of them were more or less angry with the council, each of them giving Naruko a gift to send her off. Kakashi, the only member of her own squad to show up, was first. He gave her the Hiraishin Kanai that the Yondaime had given him when he had become a Junin, along with a few Kenjutsu scrolls that he got from the Neko Anbu so she could learn to defend herself without the use of ninjutsu or genjutsu, though she never had any skill with the latter. Then it was Team 10's turn. Asuma gave her a slip of paper saying that it would help her join any shinobi temple she came across if she wished to become one of the many shinobi monks. Shikamaru gave her the customary gist of how he was going to carve the troublesome members of the council a new one, and Choji gave her several bags of his favorite Akamichi-made potato chips along with several scrolls full of soda from his parents' restaurant and a storage scroll. Team 9 was the last of the group to see her off, and they noticed the obvious absence of Sakura and Ino, both only caring about their Uchiha crush. Sakura and Ino were both in a pissed-off fit about Sasuke's injuries, and Sasuke was still unconscious from their fight at the valley. This farce by the councils is a most unyouthful piece of trash. Their flames of youth have been severely dampened, so we shall now train 4 times harder than before so that our own flames of youth shall become a blazing volcano in your honor, young Uzumaki," Guy declared as he took his nice guy stance, light glistening from his pure white teeth. "Oh, Guy-sensei," Lee yelled, fire blazing in his eyes that made everyone back away as they tried to hide from what they knew was coming. "Lee, Guy-sensei, Lee, Guy-sensei, Lee, Guy-sensei, avert your eyes," Neji screamed. Everyone covered their eyes in a panic as the two spandex wearers came together in a manly hug that had the indestructible beach genjutsu spring up behind them to blind all viewers in the way of the youth. Naruko heard a thud and everyone turned to look at Kakashi, who was spazzing on the ground from being too late to turn away, foam somehow appearing over his mouth through the mask. "Naruko-san, I was able to defy the path that fate set for me thanks to the fight I had with you, and you were a great person that does not deserve any of the crap the councils are making you put up with. I will miss you, my friend," Neji said as he held out his bandaged hand to grasp Naruko's own. "I may not have known you for long, but I just want you to know that I will miss you along with everyone else," Tenten said with a smirk as she hugged Naruko. "Also, don't worry about those fangirl bitches. I have a good punishment for people who abandon their comrades," the bun-haired girl whispered into Naruko's ear, sending shivers of fear up her spine as Tenten pulled back to reveal her face covered halfway in shadow and her eyes glowing a demonic red that she had only seen on Kyuubi. "Thank you all," Naruko said as she wiped away a stray tear. She looked towards Kakashi. "Kakashi-san, Could you please tell Anko Nisan and Iruka-sensei that I said goodbye? I know Iruka-sensei is in class and Anko Nisan is on a mission." The silver-haired man nodded as he hugged the young blonde before she turned and walked out the gate of Konoha to start her new life, not looking back at the place that had once been her home. The hospital the next morning. Sakura sighed dreamily as she watched the unconscious figure of her crush lay on his hospital bed. Ino had to leave the night before due to having to get up early for something that Asuma said was hard training. Sakura smirked as she went to get some water. "That just leaves Sasuke-kun all to me when he wakes up." The hormonal pinkette's thoughts of seducing the lone Uchiha were interrupted as she heard a low moan coming from the bed behind her. She turned to see Sasuke slowly sitting up to look around the white hospital room. "What the hell happened and why am I in the hospital?" Sasuke asked, groaning as he held his aching head. Sakura was at her crush's side in an instant, somehow making it look like she used a pink version of the famed Hiraishin. "That no-name whore, Naruko-ama, got banished for attacking you, Sasuke-kun, because she hurt you so badly. Don't worry, my Sasuke-kun, I'm here for you." Sakura shouted in joy as she imagined the black-haired boy taking her in his hospital bed in thanks for her services. What the? Naruko was banished? Sasuke thought, his onyx eyes widening in surprise as he sat straight up in his bed. What the hell is going on? I need to find Kakashi-sensei. He might know what is going on. So maybe we can go out together on a date so I can help you heal from your traumatic experience, Sasuke-kun? Sakura asked as she saw him moving to get up, thinking that he was going to take her into his arms. Chaa yes. Now that Naruko's not disrupting my plans with her ugly figure and posturing, Sasuke will finally be mine. Inner Sakura yelled happily. Shut the fuck up, Haruno. All of you idiots just ruined any attempts I might make at reconciliation. Sasuke snarled as he jumped out the window, leaving a hurt and confused Sakura sitting in her chair at the edge of his empty bed. While he went in search of his AWOL silver-haired sensei. It has been a long 6 years since the attempted defection of Sasuke Uchiha from Konohagakure no Sato to Orochimaru, one most notorious living international criminals, and his forced return after a large-scale fight with Naruko Uzumaki that tore apart the Valley of the End and caused his blonde Kunoichi teammate to be banished by the biased civilian and elders council of Konoha. In an even bigger stunt of idiocy than what Tsunade performed with the banishment by being drunk, she also somehow managed to remove the Sandaime Hokage's law that banned the knowledge of the Kyuubi being sealed inside Naruko from being learned by the younger populace. Tsunade remembered going to the girl's apartment on the end date they had scheduled for her departure to apologize for what she had done, convincing herself after 20 sake bottles, only to find an empty building and the green crystal necklace given to the younger blonde by herself when Naruko had brought the alcoholic back to the village to serve as the Godem Hokage sitting on the floor. Tsunade was then devastated when Jiraiya returned to the village, only for him to storm out in rage to search for his missing student, not even looking back until he returned 4 years after, though when he did, he and Sasuke trashed the council chambers in rage when Danzo and a few civilian council members told them to forget about the demon, and they tried to order Jiraiya to train Sasuke. Both of whom were more than happy to tell the council members to go fuck themselves. News of Naruko's leaving the village the day before she would be officially banished had caused many on the civilian part of the council and Konoha to cause a fuss. They had wanted to make a spectacle out of the girl and ridicule her in front of the whole village when she was to be officially banished. Although the other members that had ensured Naruko would be banished did not care, as long as the girl was gone, they did not care how or when she left. Now all of the younger generations knew that the hyperactive blonde was the container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. This bit of news received a large mixed response among the younger generation. Many decided to follow their parents' path and viewed the blonde prankster as the Kyuubi incarnate. Others, who had at least gotten to know Naruko in some way, did not share the older generation's view of the shunned girl and saw her as a good friend. The news released by Tsunade dropping the Third's Law, of course, had the biggest effect on the members of the now Konoha 11. Upon hearing the news, Neji said that he respected his blonde friend even more for what she did for him in the exams, for the burden that she carried was one far heavier than the one any of the branch family Hyuga carried, and he understood a small amount of the pain that Naruko went through with the burden of having to carry a seal. When Hinata heard the truth about her blonde friend, she had cried hard since she wouldn't be able to help her. Of course, in her weakened state the Hyuga elders poisoned her mind into saying that Naruko was only her friend to gain control over the Hyuga clan. She managed to resist for a short while, until they finally broke her, making her a worthy heir, much to the disapproval of Hiashi and Kurenai. Shino himself stated that he had a newfound form of respect for his former classmate, considering the burden she carried her entire life. Shino and his clan knew all too well what it felt like due to them becoming living hives for the bugs they used. Even with the news of Naruko being a Jinchuriki, the opinion of their friend to most of the other members of the Konoha 11 did not change. They all considered her their friend. The same was said by Konohamaru Corps, the young academy students still on the path that Naruko was their complete official boss. When Lee had heard about Naruko's condition, he had quickly joined Sakura in hating the blonde just so that he could be on the good side of his pink-haired crush, that is, until he was forced to read about the art of sealing by Tenten and Neji. He then started shouting about how Naruko's flames of youth were a great volcano to be able to contain such a burden like the Kyuubi in her body and that he had been unyouthful to doubt his fellow dead last. He even started running around Konoha on his hands, yelling that he would work even harder now just so that his own flames of youth would never dim again and so he could match Naruko's own inferno of youth. The only members of the Konoha 12 that had anything bad to say about Naruko were Ino, Kiba, much to his mother Tsune's disappointment, Hinata and Sakura. They had taken the view of believing that Naruko was a demon, though the two fangirls were put out a bit by their crush, Sasuke, when he rebuked them harshly. Kiba believed that the demon had cheated in the preliminaries, costing him his chance at being a Chunin and ruining his non-existent reputation as an alpha. Choji was okay with her, since they always had eating contests in the academy days and he always followed Shikamaru around knowing that if his friend believed that Naruko wasn't the demon, then he wouldn't either. When the news of Naruko's banishment had been released to the civilian and ninja population there had been a great deal of celebration by the civilians and many ninja. But that had all been quickly torn apart by an enraged Tsunade and members of the Konoha 11, having dozens of civilians and her shinobi arrested and put in holding cell for a couple weeks, some of the more violent ones being sent to T&I for some one-on-one time with Ibiki, who himself wasn't in a good mood about the banishment. Not long after the news of Naruko's banishment and being a Jinchuriki came out, the great village of Konohagakure no Sato fell under attack by a series of daily, sometimes even hourly, pranks at the mischievous hands of Konohamaru Corps. These pranks lasted for 3 years before Konohamaru and his team graduated from the academy to become Team Ebisu. The pranks were often and always varied. The pranks ranged from having stink bombs exploding in clothes stores and in food stores, and massive paint bombs exploding in the several dozens of shops, the Hokage monument and on people. All of the Inuzuka's dog kennels were opened and their canine partners released out onto the streets of Konoha. Of course, that was after people were somehow sprayed with pheromones that scarred dozens of civilians, especially the head of the Merchants Guild who now had nightmares of being spooned from behind by a massive wolf. One of the worst pranks was when, at some point, the civilians tried to celebrate Naruto banishment. Konohamaru and his team built several launchers with the help of Team Guy and fired what they called BHS aka burning horse shit. Needless to say, the festival did not continue and everyone there had to go to their homes and take loom showers. Most of these horrendous pranks were aimed at the civilian population as well as any shinobi that had been cruel or rude to Naruko in some way or another, meaning that Ebisu did not escape his future students' attentions. A lot of the Konohamaru Corps' pranks had also been aimed at the council members that had a hand in banishing Naruko. One of the worst pranks was directed at Sakura Haruno. The Corps had snuck into Sakura's bedroom at night and superglued the girl's hair to the bedposts and, to further humiliate the banshee from hell, Moegi had, after stripping the girl naked and binding her arms and legs to the bedposts, gotten Kakashi and Lee to help place her bed out in the middle of the village square naked where she became the laughing stock of the village once morning came. After that, Mebuki had to shave off all of her daughter's hair, much to her secret enjoyment, to set her free from the bed which resulted in Sakura being bald for a few months. Needless to say, Sakura was not seen by her team or anyone for a few weeks as she locked herself inside her room, mourning the loss of her Sasuke allure. The last person to be hit by their pranks had been Kushina Uzumaki and her 2 sons. When everyone found out that she was the mother of Naruko, Konohamaru got the two Chunin Izumo and Kotetsu to join in when they, along with Kakashi, Sasuke, Team Guy and Shikamaru, went to the Uzumaki compound. They ended up planting several dozens of paint bombs, a personal invention of Konohamaru's called the tar and feather seal, along with gluing Naruko's twin Kenji's body into a set of women's lingerie with a see-through sleeping gown, aka his mom's, and tying Menma up in the pantry, roped and gagged in his own long hair. To make the prank even more successful, they had Kakashi set several dozen dog poop bomb trap seals, that he made from his summons, in the master bedroom to go off in the morning when Kushina began to wake up. To say that Kushina and her sons had been pissed was a major understatement. Sasuke was one of the only ones to continue the punishments on the people he deemed guilty after the course stopped. Ino was hid where he placed her in a genjutsu that had her believe that she was enjoying a date with him, while in truth, she was stripped like Sakura and hung upside down by her ankles from the nose of Tsunade's monument head. It took 4 months before she returned to active duty and walked outside of her house, though she still lit up in a full-body blush when her friends or someone she knew looked at her. The last prank done was probably the biggest prank ever played in Konoha by the entire Punish force was the Hyuga clan. Konohamaru and Naruko's friends had broken into the Hyuga compound and stolen all the Hyuga clan's underwear, from boxers to panties and bras, speedos and thongs. Then they took rainbow-colored paint and replaced the clan's shampoo and body wash with it. Konohamaru proceeded to hang the clan's underwear up all over the village, ranging from trees to flag poles and from tops of buildings to the middle of the street. The members of the Konoha 11 that defended Naruko did not think it was possible for anybody born from the Hyuga clan, other than the old version of Hinata, to blush that much from embarrassment, but on that day they watched in awe as the entire Hyuga clan went around the entire hidden village, picking up their underclothes in front of everyone while their bodies looked like the rainbows that covered AIM when not raining. Hiyashi had to go to the Anbu headquarters, where Ibiki and his platoon had cameras waiting as the rainbow-colored man had to grab his pink Speedo underwear from where they flew in the middle of the courtyard. The only Hyugas that had not been hit by Konohamaru's prank was Neji, who participated, and Hinata's younger sister Hanabi, who Konohamaru has a crush on. 2 months after Naruto's banishment, the news had spread like a wildfire to other countries. When the countries, people and villages that Naruko helped heard about the banishment, they were enraged beyond belief, especially when they found out the reason for the banishment. When the Land of Waves learned of their savior's banishment, they were beyond pissed off that the hero of their country had been banished just for doing her job. They then sent a message to Konoha to tell the hidden village that they were ripping up and dropping the trade treaty that they had recently made for Naruko's patriotic duties to their people, and that all merchant and transport ships that were controlled by the Land of Waves would refuse to work or trade with Konoha. Also, any and all missions that the Land of Waves would have originally given to the village hidden in leaves would now be given to Suna and Taki. What was worse was when Gato was killed, the people of Wave took over the Gato shipping company, giving them major control over the elemental sea trading industry. Konoha had sent several peace offerings to try and reopen negotiations with the prosperous island nation. Unfortunately, each and every one of the groups were kicked out as soon as they arrived and their offerings spat upon. The last one was even given a message from the new daimyo of Wave, Suna, who told them that if any leaf ninja or citizen of Konoha set foot in the Land of Waves, they will be sent back in a body bag or coffin. This warning got the desired effect from the hidden village and they had stopped trying, especially after one of Tezuna's samurai sent a Nei agent from Danzo back in a matchbox. That of course caused Danzo to lose favor with many council members and the daimyo of the Land of Fire. The next country to act was the newly named Land of Spring. When Koyuki had heard about what had happened, she had been beyond angry or pissed with the Leaf Village. She went to Konoha escorted by a legion of 300 samurai and the Guardian 12 that she borrowed from the Fire Daimyo, who was not pleased that all of the treaties were being dropped and demanded a meeting with the Hokage. She yelled at the council and Konoha for their biased banishment of her nation's heroine, even going so far as to punch Sakura in the face when she badmouthed Naruko, breaking the girl's nose, and annulling the alliance and the technology trade treaty with Konoha, as well as annulling all other trade agreements with them. The council tried to persuade the young daimyo from annulling both the alliances with her country and village and annulling the trade agreements, but she would not budge, even slapping the head of the Merchants Guild when he tried to get fresh with her. Koyuki soon after left the village, not wanting to stay any longer in the disgraced hidden village. After Koyuki's tirade, Shibuki the Cage of Takigakure arrived in the village with a full squad of his newly trained Junin and his new fiancée Fu, the Nanabi Jinchuriki, demanding a meeting with the Hokage. Shibuki had been greatly angered by what Konoha had done simply because Naruko was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, especially since his fiancée was the Nanabi Jinchuriki. He had become disgusted at the way they had treated a good friend of his, especially one that had taught him how to be a real leader for his people, not to mention that Naruko saved his people from the rogue Taki Junin Suin and his followers. Shibuki then informed the busty Hokage that he and the villagers of Takigakure had agreed to annul their long-standing alliance between their villages since they wanted no part of a place that would banish a great hero for doing the job asked of them, just like they had done to the White Fang and Naruko. 2 years after Naruko's banishment, Gaara, the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi, became the newest case. He, like the other former allies, also tore apart the treaty between Konoha and Suna, only keeping the treaty between the two villages where both sides would help each other in a time of war, but only if it affected both villages. Suna even gained all of the standing missions from the Land of Waves, Spring, and their own daimyo. One of the last ones to come had been Michiru, the king of the Land of Moon. He pulled every single bit of funding that he had placed in Konoha after Naruko and Team 7 had helped him liberate his nation from an usurper and started sending his missions to Suna and even Kumo. He told the squirming counselors that begged for him not to, since the king's money had been lining their pockets, that if they wanted his funding back for their village, they had to unbanish Naruko, get on their knees before her and beg her forgiveness while kissing the ground she walked on like she was a goddess reborn. Though meeting that request was hard to do, due to after Naruko had been banished she had just vanished, making even the Akatsuki baffled at this turn of events. Land of Waves. Now after the heroic deeds of Naruko Uzumaki 7 years ago, the Land of Waves prospered greatly under the freedom they acquired after the death of the shipping tyrant Gato by the hands of Zabuza the demon hidden in the mist and the young girl named Naruko Uzumaki. Hoping to talk about a better trade agreement since the one they had with Konoha fell to pieces after the banishment of Naruko, the new Land of Fire daimyo requested that Tazuna, the new daimyo of Wave after the death of their previous leader at the hands of Gato, come to the Land of Fire capital so that they could draw up a trade and alliance treaty with a small prosperous nation. To which the famed bridge builder agreed so as to meet another country leader. It is tradition that every daimyo of the elemental nations is accompanied by their own personal select guards. Most from the guardian monks of their nation's shinobi temples, such as the renowned guardian shinobi 12 in the Land of Fire, or their own land samurai. And to the bafflement of the new fire daimyo, the Wave daimyo had chosen a single, young female bodyguard for this job, who he sought out from her current living place in the ruined Land of Whirlpools for this assignment shortly after he had received the message from his fellow daimyo, no longer trusting any of the people from Konoha after the betrayal of his nation's heroine. The guard he had requested agreed to accompany the old bridge builder turned daimyo to the meeting. A blonde-haired woman with blue eyes and 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek, wearing a purple and silver armor, sighed quietly as she shifted to her other foot to keep the blood moving as she waited outside the office of her old friend, waiting to start the journey that would lead into the area around where she was banished. She had a silver hair ornament piece attached to her left golden bang. Beneath the plate covering her torso was a dark blue, short-sleeved shirt that was cut off at the midriff and had an orange swirl-shaped patch in the middle of the shirt, made of highly breathable fabric, and a pair of black biker shorts. She wore armored boots, on her hands were light purple fingerless gloves, and she wore a longsword across the back of her waist, that was held to her body by a pink and purple sash, that was made from strong chakra-conductive steel and laced with various seals that made it possible to channel her chakra and elements into the blade. "I thank you for coming to guard my super self once again, Uzumaki Dono," Tazuna said as he opened the door to his office, letting the captain of his guard and the head of their fishing company out to leave. Snapping the armored woman from her bored thoughts. The old man now wore a formal men's kimono that was an artistry of 3 shades of yellow and blue, describing the liberation of the Land of Waves, and his wavy, gray hair had been smoothed back by the man's daughter before the meeting, a large change compared to the baggy old pants, yellow rope belt and sleeveless workshirt he used to wear. When the man's brown eyes met her oceanic orbs, Tazuna gave the woman standing in front of him a grandfatherly smile. As you were probably filled in by Tsunami, the Fire Daimyo wishes to discuss a trade and alliance treaty with me, so he'll be traveling to his estate in the land of fire capital Keisha. The man told his nation's savior, getting a stiff nod from her. I know you aren't comfortable in the land of fire, but will you go with me and Tsunami at least to the daimyo's castle? After that, I can ask Case Cage Gaara to spare some of his shinobi for the escort back. Naruko looked up at the man with a slight smile. Of course Tazuna Gigi, I would do anything for my real family. She said as Tazuna smiled and patted her armored back. Then the two of them left the man's office to go find the man's wayward daughter and grandson before they had to leave in the morning. Land of Fire, 20 miles from Keisha. A short week had passed as the small group left the Land of Waves for the Land of Fire capital, Keisha. Tazuna, his daughter Tsunami and their guardian Naruko had slowly made their way towards the capital with only a few hindrances from bandits. While the new Fire Daimyo had been happy to offer to enlist some of his land's leaf ninja to escort the older man, Tazuna politely refused, saying that they hold no trust for the Land of Fire's hidden village. It was a risky move, considering that their small band would make an excellent target for any bandits or missing nin looking to make some easy money. Though she had already taken down a few bandit groups on their way, traveling in a small carriage with only the sword-wielding blonde and their driver as protection. But the young Fire Daimyo wasn't able to shake the Wave Daimyo's absolute faith in the young woman that had saved their home as a young girl. While the small family would admit that their faith was a bit foolish to just have one person guarding them without backup, they wanted to spend as much time with their savior as they possibly could, before the woman disappeared again so she wouldn't be found by the traders of her village or Akatsuki. Naruko recalled her memories of the past few days she had spent with the bridge builder's family after they found her living and training in the ruins of her clan's homeland, Uzushiogakure, also known as the Land of Whirlpools, where she had been learning a new path for her life and about her ancestry after traveling around the elemental nations, avoiding the Land of Stone and the Land of Fire. She would be starting to travel around as soon as the job requested of her by Tazuna was completed and over with, leaving anybody that knew her unable to find any traces of her. Tazuna, of course, wanted to appoint the girl as the captain of his own personal guard, but he was refused on the grounds that staying in one place too long would end badly for anyone and everyone close to her, either by the Akatsuki that was after the Biju or if Konoha ever wanted their weapon back. She would only protect the old man up to the Fire Daimyo's castle, to where afterwards the family would request some shinobi from Gaara, and Tazuna happily accepted that. As the coach that Tazuna and Tsunami rode in made its way closer to the capital, its golden-haired guardian held out her hand and halted the carriage. Pulling out a few kunai, she threw them into the forest at a high speed, causing several meaty thuds to be heard, and then she dodged some kunai that landed around her with explosive tags wrapped around the hilts. The resulting explosions from the impacted kunai caused smoke and dirt to cover the clearing and the armored 19-year-old, leaving no visibility, as two Leaf Chunin and a Root Anbu rushed towards the scene, with the intent to capture the long-missing Jinchuriki and maybe hold the Wave Daimyo hostage to regain the treaties. Attackiness was a grave mistake on your part, a monotone female voice spoke from behind the Root Nen, making the three shinobi's eyes widen in surprise. They quickly turned only for an armored figure to slam her blade down towards the Root Nen. In her hand was a large double-edged longsword, roughly 3 feet and 7 inches long, with the blade being a foot and a half wide, engraved with an assortment of different seals. Pushing chakra into the seals on the end points, and running her strong wind-natured chakra through the blade to make the already powerfully sharp blade sharp enough to slice through steel with ease. She gripped the hilt with both hands and brought the sword slamming down on the closest shinobi, bisecting clean through the Root Anbu from noggin to groin before he could even use his tanto to guard against the attack. The remaining two positioned themselves to the left and right of the woman, both now at attention as they saw their comrade fall into 2 pieces. A sweep of the large blade and the kunai they threw a second later were batted out of the air by the large sword, one of the knives rebounding and piercing its thrower's leg. The blonde spun on her heel and quickly beheaded the injured man when he failed to get out of her range, like his already deceased partner. The last Leaf Nen, Akunoichi, hesitated a few feet away for a brief moment, staring in slight fear as she weighed the option of attacking and being killed quickly like her comrades or fleeing and living to fight for Konoha another day. Leave, My job is to protect and defend Tazuna Gigi. I will not kill you if you choose to leave. Naruko spoke up, catching the panicked woman's attention as the golden-haired blonde planted her sword in the ground before her. Before she faced the woman with a cold, emotionless expression as if reading the Chunin's panicked thoughts. The woman, who turned out to only be 4 years younger than the 19-year-old Jinchuriki, swallowed deeply and decided to take the obviously more powerful shinobi's mercy and flee, fully ready to ask the council and her other comrades the questions of why she was told that the girl they were calling a demon would spare her life. In a tree, 19 feet away from the clearing, a tall Konoha Junin with spiky silver hair that seemed to defy gravity was standing on a tree branch watching what had been happening. He had a dark-colored eye, being the only part of his face not covered by his mask and slanted headband. He wore his Konoha Hite Ite over his left eye that has a small vertical scar running down it and is replaced by an implanted Sharingan eye. He wore a half-facial mask over the lower half of his face and the traditional Konoha Junin flak jacket with his father's repaired white light chakra saber attached to his back. He had been assigned as extra, yet secret, protection by Tsunade for the newly made Wave Daimyo, since he knew the older man from his mission to Wave with his former Genin team, for when Tazuna arrived in the capital, he had been looking for the team he had been assigned to guard the man with after they disappeared and came rushing over to the clearing he was currently viewing from his perch when he had felt the large chakra spike and was able to see what looked to be a battle happening around the Wave Daimyo's halted carriage, both Tazuna and his daughter, Tsunami, watching in interest from their windows. The Cyclopean copycat knew that it wasn't his place to interfere with the battle going on, though he recognized his squad as the ones attacking, but he then recognized a very familiar chakra signature in the clearing. The son of White Fang's eye widened as the silver-haired Junin saw an armored young woman with knee-length golden blonde hair, with 3 whisker-like birthmarks on each cheek and cold, emotionless blue eyes. While the face was older and different than before, the Junin had no doubt that they belonged to that of somebody he once knew. A former Konoha Kunoichi who had been banished years ago due to the prejudice of certain council members and the drunken foolishness of a certain kage of the village. Naruko Uzumaki, the missing Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, only daughter and secret heiress of the late Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and the red-hot-blooded habanero, Kushina Uzumaki. Banished for crippling, the last loyal Uchiha that tried to turn traitor for Konoha's most notorious missing nin, Orochimaru. As Kakashi watched his wayward student tear apart the team he had come with, killing 2 of them, he could not help but think of all the things that happened in the past 6 years. So much had happened and so much had changed over the short period of time, and it all started when the Konoha Council had banished a certain blonde Kunoichi. Kakashi-san, Naruko called, causing the masked man's heart to skip a beat as his visible eye widened at being caught by the girl that wasn't even looking in his direction. He hadn't noticed that the battle was over and the Kunoichi of their group had run away. While you have my respect for being a slight sensei to me, you can try to suppress your chakra and scent all you want, but I can still smell you and I am a sensor-type ninja. I'm telling you right now, if you attempt to attack me or capture me for being in the land of fire while doing my job, I will make sure that you and anyone else that tries to attack us will regret it greatly, just like this team that already attacked me. Kakashi sighed, seeing that he had no choice, and he jumped down from the tree he had been standing on, landing before the girl and met his former student's cold gaze head-on. Tsunade-sama repealed your banishment 3 years ago, Naruko-san. Everyone has been searching for you since you left, the silver-haired man said as he tried to make his former Kunoichi student come peacefully. I'm not going back to a place full of assholes and traitors that are willing to stab you in the back just for doing your job and following orders again, just like me and your father. Naruko stated plainly, no emotion entering her voice, before turning her back on the man that was once her sensei as he flinched at his father being mentioned and slammed her sword back into its sheath on her back. Tell that Hagati old fart that I'm never returning to that piece of trash village after what she and my so-called allies did. That village deserves to be burned to the ground for betraying the ideals of the Shodem and Naidame. No wonder Itachi left to be a missing nin. Kakashi kept his mask-covered mouth shut and lowered his head sadly. Kakashi watched in self-loathing as his former student motioned for the carriage driver to continue onwards, not even looking back at her Cyclopean ex-sensei. The message was very clear from where he could see the blonde's back and swaying hair. Kakashi sighed as he watched the small group continue onward towards the capital and slowly gathered up the remains of the root ninja and Chunin, then made his way back to Konoha. He sighed as he looked around at the clearing. It would be roughly a full day's worth of running at his top speed to reach the hidden village, and by then he knew that Naruko would have crossed any of the borders out of the Land of Fire. At least they had an idea of who to ask on her whereabouts now, though he highly doubted the Wave Daimyo or his family and the people of their small island nation would even talk to a leaf shinobi, much less let them in the borders. Keisha, Daimyo's palace steps, an hour later. Naruko hugged Tazuna and Tsunami as they bade her goodbye, the Fire Daimyo waiting patiently on his palace steps for his guests to finish. "Be careful, Naruko-chan," Tsunami said as she hugged the armored girl tightly, knowing that they probably wouldn't see their hero for a while. "Of course Tsunami Obasan," Naruko said as she moved back with a smile. "If I can evade them for 6 years, I am sure that I can outrun them again." She waved to her surrogate family one more time as they walked towards the Fire Daimyo, before she turned and walked towards the city gates. Giving a respectful nod to the coach driver as he started contacting Suna to get some shinobi as a guard. She stopped several times to grab some food supplies from the many shops in the city's marketplace. "Welp," Naruko thought as she stood at the city gates, checking over her food and item scrolls, before she straightened her sword on the back of her waist. "Time to get moving. If I put in extra speed, I will be out of the Land of Fire and into the Land of Rivers by nightfall." The blonde former kunoichi ran through the gate, leaving the fire capital behind in a burst of speed, speeding off into the forest surrounding the city. "I had better meet up with the others as well and see how Renji and Shaolin are doing." Konohagakure, Hokage's office one day later. Kakashi was sighing, wishing for a long dip into the sake bottles he had stacked up at home next to his Icha paradise as he walked out of the office of Tsunade Senju, the Godem Hokage and granddaughter of Hashirama Senju, the Shodem Hokage. When he had arrived in her office with the news that he had spotted his banished student, Tsunade had been shocked and yet happy that her little sister figure had been found. Now she was silently sobbing upon hearing how someone she saw as a little sister no longer wanted to return to her home, even calling it a piece of trash that deserved to be burned. The good news was that they finally found her and she appeared to be very capable of taking care of herself, even without the use of ninjutsu or genjutsu. The bad news was now she had to retrieve the younger blonde and bring her back to Konoha, most likely by force. Tsunade knew very well that Naruko would put up a fight given what Konoha did to her with the banishment and mistreatment for being a Jinchuriki, more than likely giving the Retrieval team a reason to use lethal force just to subdue her. Still feeling very guilty over her decision to not read further into what she had on her desk and not saying anything during the initial banishment, while Koharu and Homura both read the banishment to Naruko with a smirking Danzo standing only a little bit away from them all. She had broken the once kind heart of the younger Uzumaki, and hadn't said a word about it until it was too late. The busty Hokage remembered how Jiraiya had set out to find his missing goddaughter after he had returned from his recon mission to pick up his new apprentice, and was told about the banishment so that he could find and train the girl and maybe tell her about her parents, but he was disappointed when he came back to the village after 4 years of searching without a hint of a sighting from any of his contacts. He still refused to talk to anyone that had a hand in Naruko's pain or the recently returned Kushina. "Tsunade-sama," Shikamaru said from where he was standing in front of his genin team, his right hand stroking the small pointed beard he had grown over the years, looking just like his father just without the scars and wrinkles. "What are we going to do about Naruko? Especially with the Akatsuki still hunting the 9 Biju. We need to get answers from the people that know her," the platinum blonde said as she stared at the mini Shikaku with her fingers crossed before her face. "I will send teams out to speak to the villages and nations that she has helped in the past. Once we hear back from the teams or we manage to spot Naruko, we'll set up tracking and detainment teams to go after her. There's still a chance we can reason with her before we'll have to use force to bring her back to Konoha." Shikamaru sighed at the Hokage's statement. He still remembered the tantrum he had thrown that surprised everyone when they had banished Naruko just because she was a Jinchuriki. He then worked harder than ever, dropping his lazy antics, so that he could help the others fix the mistake their elders had performed. Even helping Sasuke, who was trying to atone for his sin in the matter, to set up dozens of strategies that they could use to get their lost friend back. The 19-year-old Nara heir hated that some of his and the blonde's friends had condemned her once they had found out about her tenant from the council and elders the day after Naruko had left. Then there was the current red-haired problem that had showed up in Konoha with her 2 sons 4 years ago. Shikamaru and Sasuke had both blown up on the woman, along with a few of the clan heads, the Hokage and some Anbu that had known her in their youth when they found out that she was Naruko's mother. In my opinion, they shouldn't have even let that bitch through the gates, much less give her a clan seat on the council. Shikamaru thought, Sasuke and I have created a few strategies that could help with retrieving Naruko without a fight or any bloodshed, though having Kushina around in the village or on the retrieval squad like she has requested isn't going to help our case, especially when Naruko finds out about her and her reason for abandoning her. Shikamaru said as he stared lazily at the Senju. Tsunade nodded at his words. She had gone on a berserker rage once the redhead she had seen as a surrogate daughter showed up in Konoha with Naruko's twin, Kenji, and her youngest child, Menma, and had given her reason for leaving Naruko to the mercies of the villagers. It had taken an entire third of the Anbu force and Kakashi with Shikaku to stop her from destroying Konoha while she tried to kill the redhead. Right now Kushina was trying her best to be allowed on the retrieval team that would bring her daughter back to Konoha, though most of the clan heads were still against her even being allowed near the girl. The civilians themselves were also trying to derail the situation, but for a different reason, so that they could keep the demon away from Konoha. Tsunade sighed as she raised a hand to dismiss the Junin. Tell me when all of the Konoha 12 and the Konohamaru Corps are back from their respective missions so that we don't have to repeat the plan. Shikamaru nodded. While his respect for the woman had fallen when she signed the banishment of his friend, it had slowly been coming back for her efforts. It just would never be like it used to. The Nara heir quickly ushered his almost asleep genin team from the room and dismissed them so he could meet up with Sasuke and Choji to make more plans on how to get their old friend back. Konoha. Week later. Tsunade was not very happy right now. She needed to know where Naruko was, but the wave daimyo nor any of the younger blonde's friends outside the village were exactly being helpful to Konoha at the moment. The response from Tazuna was written in an angry tone, making the message clear to the Sannin. Who I decide to hire for my protection is none of Konoha's business, especially after your shinobi attacked us on the way to Keisha. Not sincerely yours, Tazuna. She didn't blame him at all for his anger, especially after Kakashi had shown her the root Anbu's body and the dead Chunin, along with the dead shinobi that Naruko had killed before the initial fight, the last person of their team having shown up 5 hours after the Junin. Still, she had sent one of her Anbu to Wave and the surrounding area on the off chance that the younger Uzumaki was there, to warn her of the impending danger from Akatsuki and hopefully bring her back. Preferably by choice rather than force, though she doubted her Anbu could with the way Naruko had effortlessly killed the root and Chunin earlier. She was slamming her head against the desk after getting a "fuck you" only response from Koyuki when the team's Kakashi, Yuhi, Guy and Asuma walked in with Team Ebisu, Anko and Iruka shortly following them. Jiraiya, she already knew, was standing in the office at the window with Shizune by her desk. All of you have been summoned here because the time has come to retrieve Naruko Uzumaki and bring her back to Konoha. Now, this is an S-class secret, only to be shared with this group and others of my choosing. You have all been chosen to work as a retrieval team for Naruko and will be working on different contacts that we have in the elemental nations, ranging from hidden villages to bars until we have found her and we can mobilize as a full group to bring her back. As much as I wish for it differently, you are authorized to use force if negotiations fail, as she has stated that she isn't willingly going to come back to, in her words, I will never return to that piece of trash village after what the Hokage and my so-called allies did. That village deserves to be burned to the ground for betraying the ideals of the Shodem and Nidaime. Tsunade decided it was wise to leave out the part about Itachi, despite having shown Sasuke the truth behind the massacre. So, we really are going after her then? Kakashi muttered with a sparkle of hope appearing in his visible eye after spending the last week being completely drunk and being comforted by his eternal rival and Anko. After all this time, Sasuke closed his eyes in a feeling of relief. We've finally found her, but can you honestly blame her for not wanting to return? No, I can't, Tsunade said in a downtrodden voice that got the attention of everyone. But with the Akatsuki looking like it is beginning to move again, it is a danger to her and all Jinchuriki out in the world. This time we will make sure the village will protect her like it should have done a long time ago, instead of the mistreatment it caused in the past." Sakura said nothing to the Hokage, her sensei and Sasuke's words. She hated Naruko with a passion like a couple others from the group. She of course knew that Naruko wasn't the demon fox that was sealed inside her. No demon that could lay waste to mountains would be that weak or idiotic. But unfortunately Sakura was still pissed about Naruko hurting her precious Sasuke, and she blamed Naruko for the fact that the Uchiha heir wouldn't return her undying love. Their new teammate Sai just sat quietly behind them, secretly recording all of this into one of his ink rats to give to Danzo later on. According to Kakashi-san's report of an incident with his temporary team attacking the Wave Daimyo, she has been staying in the land of waves for an undetermined amount of time, she said as she pulled out a small map of the elemental nations. "I believe that we should investigate here first. Tazuna, the Wave Daimyo, has made it clear that he wouldn't help us at all, so I am sending a couple teams to check out the surrounding area with one of my Anbu that is already there in secret. His codename is Tora." "That makes sense." Jiraiya snarled from his spot on the window. "He is the only person capable of using Mokuton. I'm betting that you were going to have him detain her immediately on sight before negotiations could begin." Tsunade just ignored her angry teammate's jab at her choice. He was still pissed about the situation 6 years ago, only appearing in the village when he was absolutely needed. That being assured of after he punched Kushina across Konoha when she tried to get him to teach her youngest son, Menma, and the boy badmouthed Naruko. "We're getting off topic." Tsunade snapped back at the man before he could speak up again. "The point is, despite Naruko not wanting to come back, the Akatsuki is beginning to start up their activities and we believe that they are going after the Jinchuriki from all of the villages." This got a gasp from everyone in the room, besides Sai and the purple-haired Anbu standing in the corner. "We unfortunately have no knowledge of what skills and techniques she is capable of besides what appears to be mastery in Kenjutsu from how she killed the rogue team that attacked Tazuna. We also don't know if she is traveling with anybody." "Is everyone with me so far?" Tsunade asked as she rested her mouth against her entwined fingers. Each of the shinobi and kunoichi in the room nodded in complete understanding of the situation, the ones believing that she was a demon planning out mentally on how they should kill her. "For your knowledge, in case you come into contact with her, Jinchuriki are capable of manifesting cloaks and tails of their Biju's chakra for enhanced defense and greatly augmented attack power. The Anbu Tora that you will meet in Wave and Jiraiya are the only ones currently in Konoha, besides Kushina and her eldest son Kenji, that is capable of siphoning off the demonic chakra and weakening her. If you do encounter her and she goes beyond 3 tails, entering the stage where she would gain a blood cloak, or a full-blown tailed beast state, anybody below elite Junin or Anbu are to withdraw from the battle and allow the ones that stay to act alone as well as send the fastest summon to me so I can immediately join them in the battle." Tsunade said as her gaze slid over each and every one of them. "Am I clear?" "Hi, Hokage-sama." The teams yelled with a quick, stiff salute. "You are all dismissed, expect your missions within the week." Tsunade sighed as she heard a knock on the door, 3 minutes after everyone had left the office. "Enter," she said, already knowing who it was having felt her chakra coming towards the tower during the meeting. The door swung open to reveal a crimson-haired woman standing in the doorway, instantly getting a glare from Tsunade and the Anbu in the room. This was Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina, the Uzumaki clan matriarch and a council member, who wanted to join the retrieval team that Tsunade had made so that she could bring her daughter back home. Kushina had returned to Konoha bringing her 2 sons with her 2 years after the Jinchuriki's banishment and had told everyone about where she had been, having been the wife of a now-deceased Land of Rivers noble. She had then been brutally attacked by Tsunade and a few others that had been Naruko's friends when they found out about her being the young Uzumaki's mother. At the time she repealed the banishment, Tsunade firmly believing that Naruko would be back any day, though she had been worried about what would happen when she and her mother met, and more worryingly, when Naruko and her twin and younger half-brother met. While Tsunade was never one to mince words, she found it hard to look at Kushina without a look of complete hatred. She had abandoned Naruko and disappeared, leading everyone to believe that she was dead, only to return with her 2 sons in tow. Naruko's twin, Kenji, holding the other half of the Kyuubi inside his body. She had seen how the redhead adored and spoiled her 2 children, and she knew how Naruko would react once she found out about her mother being alive, and knew that it wouldn't be anywhere near pretty or favorable for Konoha. "Hello Kushina-san. What can I do for you?" she asked, acid in her tone at the honorific. Kushina stood in front of the busty blonde's desk in silence, until Tsunade motioned towards one of the chairs. "I wanted to talk to you about Naruko and joining the retrieval team," Kushina said after a moment of silence. "You have a plan to bring her back into the village, Hokage-sama, but I think we should abandon it." Tsunade frowned at the woman that had been begging to be let onto the team's change of attitude and leaned towards the redhead, a dark glare covering her eyes. "Really? And why do you think that Uzumaki?" Tsunade asked, carefully trying to hold back her growing rage at the woman's continued presence in her office. She already knew that one of the retrieval team members had told the woman about the mission. She just needed to find out who and discipline them. "It's obvious that she holds no love for the village or us, Tsunade-sama. Having Naruko here and wondering if you won't wake up to find her gone the morning after will only stress you and village resources further," Kushina explained, struggling to keep her face neutral as she spoke. Tsunade looked her over with a cynical eye for a short second. "Is it Konoha and my safety that you're worrying about, Uzumaki, or what your long-lost daughter will do once she knows that you are alive and that you abandoned her to the mercies of a hypocritical and grieving village?" she asked. Kushina's flinch said everything that she had been trying to hide from the woman. "You made the stupid choice to abandon her just because she was a Jinchuriki and looked like your husband, Uzumaki. When and how she reacts is your and her business. I'm certainly not going to stop her from attacking you if she learns about you." Tsunade felt a hint of satisfaction when she noticed a couple more flinches. "Even if it results in mine and my son's murders?" Kushina asked, instantly realizing it was a foolish question to ask. Tsunade glared in unbridled hatred at the Uzumaki matriarch, her killing intent making Shukaku's madness look like a tame house kitten. "When you came back to this village after 15 years of being the fuck buddy of a Land of Rivers noble and bringing back Naruko's twin with the noble's offspring, I let you and your family stay despite you abandoning your daughter. When you asked to be allowed your old compound, I gave that to you, and when you asked for some work, I allowed you to be a Junin again along with being a member of the Shinobi Clan Council. Knowing that you willingly abandoned a child to be attacked by people daily and not asking for your fucked up reasons on why you did it." The blonde snapped, her rage building with every word spoken. "You went around to most of this village's Chunin and your old friends and asked about who and how Naruko was. Some stories were bad due to their biased nature, but a lot of them were good. You heard about Naruko's selfless attitude before she was kicked out of her home by biased, shitty people, and you seriously believe that she is capable of inflicting willful cruelty on a child?" she asked incredulously. "Maybe the apple doesn't fall far from the tree then," she added darkly. It was a dirty shot, but it worked as Kushina's head snapped up to stare at the woman that she had once seen as a surrogate mother. "I will leave you alone then," Kushina said as she rose from her chair and walked to the door, only to stop when Tsunade spoke up again. "Just so you know, out of your entire family, I can see Kenji as the only one that Naruko can tolerate. Your son Menma has expressed an extreme hatred of his elder sister because you abandoned her, believing that she is an embarrassment and failure of the clan when it is you who broke the clan's most fundamental law of never abandoning family, making you the disgrace. On top of that, she will hate you for abandoning her to live the life of an impoverished orphan," Tsunade said with a snarl. "At least Jiraiya and I have the excuse for not performing our duties as her godparents, having believed that the daughter of Minato was dead before you returned and told us that the girl we had made the partial replacement for her was in all actuality our goddaughter. Congratulations, you've got your wish. You and your sons will be placed on the team. Now get out of my office, Junin Uzumaki." The last bit was said in a shout, making the redhead flee the office with tears running down her face. Land of Claw Village, same time. Naruko sighed as she took a rest in one of the dango restaurants situated on the outskirts of the village. She had been running for the past week, making sure that she put plenty of distance between her and the Land of Fire, so that she couldn't be followed by any Konoha shinobi after meeting Kakashi. "Okay, so this is Kokonui," Shaolin and Renji said that they would be meeting me here. The blonde swordwoman thought as she took a bite of the tasty dango she ordered. Naruko was so occupied with savoring the taste of the dumplings on her tongue and staring off in thought, that she never noticed a red blur rocketing towards her and colliding into her side, throwing her off the bench and onto the ground. Naruko groaned. What hit him? She began thinking only to hear a familiar voice shouting as someone hugged her. Naruko-sama. Naruko-sama. Hello Shaolin-chan. Naruko said as she stood up, pulling the hyperactive girl off of her torso. Once everything settled down, Naruko looked over to see two people standing before her. Hello Shaolin-chan. Renji-san. Renji nodded in silence as he groaned at the sight of Naruko's new favorite food of dango. Renji had brown eyes, with brown hair framing his face that stretched down to the base of his neck while sticking up slightly on the top of his head, and he has a slender build showing that he isn't much of a person for taijutsu. He was wearing a dark blue cape and what appeared to be a scholar's travel robe with a short plate and shoulder armor. At his hip was a scroll that held his signature bow staff and his ninjutsu scrolls. Unlike Naruko, he is a natural at ninjutsu, mostly due to his past of being one of Orochimaru's former experiments before Naruko had rescued him from one of the snake's many labs. The traitorous Sannin having implanted a pair of Mangekyo Sharingan eyes into the boy, before sealing excess chakra from the 4th, 6th and 3rd Biju into his body in an attempt to make his own Jinchuriki weapon, which in turn caused Renji to go berserk, destroying the countryside until Naruko managed to stop him. Shaolin on the other hand had silver hair that reached down to her knees and tan, gray eyes that seemed to peer into one's heart. She was wearing a female style of black and red female samurai armor with a pink yukata beneath the plate, and she bore 2 katanas on both hips, showing her to be learning the 4-sword style created by famed samurai of the Land of Iron, Enkidu Mizahasha. Shaolin had been saved by Naruko 2 years into the blonde's exile from a group of bandits led by 3 B-rank missing nin that had slaughtered her family and village before her eyes. Afterwards, Naruko adopted Shaolin as her surrogate daughter after the girl wouldn't stop clinging to her. Unfortunately for the blonde, in reality, Shaolin saw Naruko as a goddess in human form and constantly referred to the blonde as Naruko-sama, much to Naruko's displeasure. She also hated Konoha and anyone related to it with a passion for causing pain to her, goddess. It's been a while Naruko-san, Renji said with a smirk as he quickly hid the dango that Naruko and Shaolin crushed during their fall, so as to not incur the wrath of his blonde friend for the destruction of one of the food of the gods, which so far consisted of ramen, dango and a curry made in the land of rivers known as the curry of life. How have you been? It's been 5 months since you went to see Uzushio. I am fine. I had a run-in with my old sensei and a few leaf shinobi while protecting Tazuna Jiji on his trip to the Land of Fire capital. Naruko said calmly as if she was talking about the weather, though the two of them got the message loud and clear. What are we going to do, Naruko-sama? Shaolin asked, her childlike tone becoming dead serious as she fingered her swords. I don't know yet. I am still going to try and rebuild Uzushiogakure into a home for all of us. Naruko said. I just didn't expect to run into them this early. If I know the old hag, she is already coming up with a plan and a team to take me back so that Konoha has its weapon. Hokage's office. Tsunade gave a sudden sneeze that startled Shizune, and they both watched as the large pile of paperwork that the busty blonde had just finished organizing flew out the window and into the streets of the village. No, Kami, why do you hate me? Came the loud scream of Tsunade that startled everyone in the village before she sent out a few Anbu and Konohamaru's team to gather up all of the documents. We are going to need to meet up with B-sensei and Yugito-senpai then, so that we can finish your training. Renji said as he looked around them to see if there were any leaf shinobi in the vicinity. Naruko nodded. She was currently able to use up to the 7th tail of Kurama's chakra before she went berserk. She would definitely need to meet with the energetic rapper if she were to be able to take on whatever high-level shinobi Konoha sent, or the Akatsuki. She had made a deal with the Yondaime Reikage after a run-in with a squad of his shinobi, and they had decided to become allies with Kumo in times of attack and distress. Part of the terms was the famous Killer Bee teaching her how to control her Biju's chakra. Kurama of course decided to tell her his name during the training after she agreed to certain requests from the demon in exchange of using his power. We will need to meet up with Tayuya first. I believe she should be around the land of waterfalls, and I need to speak to a couple of old friends. Naruko said. Renji and Shaolin nodded. Though first I need to beat the crap out of dear Renji for the destruction of the glorious dango. The blonde snarled ferally as she finally noticed a couple of her boxes having been smashed. Renji immediately paled in fear. What? Why me? Renji yelled as he started running away from his crazed friend. You and Shaolin were the ones that crushed it when she jumped you. Naruko cackled crazily as she pulled out her sword. I can't attack Shaolin-chan, the blonde said as if it were a matter of fact. She's just too cute. Renji looked back at her words and he could have sworn that the samurai-clad girl smiled evilly in his direction as the blonde Jinchuriki chased him all over the village, creating small craters in the road as she kept trying to catch him with her large sword. After venting some of her anger on the now beaten and bound Renji, Naruko sat back down on the bench and began gossiping with her surrogate daughter as they devoured a new box of dango paid for from Renji's wallet. Not knowing that several different powers were plotting her capture. Unidentified place in Konoha. Danzo smirked as he ran his hand over the manufactured Sharingan and Mokuton arm that Orochimaru had given him to replace the arm he lost to the Gold and Silver brothers, Kinkaku and Ginkaku, back in his youth. He quickly covered up his arm as a blank masked figure appeared behind him in a kneeling position. Yes, Sai, what do you have to report? The now revealed Sai removed his mask and pulled one of his drawing scrolls out of his back pouch, before handing the scroll to Konoha's elder. The information on the meeting between the Rookie 12 and Tsunade about the sighting and retrieval plan of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Danzo's attention was snagged at the mention of the weapon that should have been rightfully his in his mind. Hey, finally, despite all of your attempts to stop me from gaining my weapon, the Jinchuriki shall finally be mine. Sarutobi, Senju. Danzo thought with a smirk. Good work, Sai. I want you to remain on the lookout for more information, until we can get the Jinchuriki into Konoha and place the root loyalty seal on her. Hi, Danzo-sama, Sai said as he bowed and placed his mask back on his face, before he disappeared in a shunshin. Sai appeared outside of the abandoned bunker that the elder was running his root program in and gave a smirk. Time to tell Jiraiya-sama about Danzo-sama's plans. He then shunshined again to where his real leader was after the Sannin had removed Danzo's command seal from the pale boy's tongue. Deep within a dark cave in the Land of Fire, astral images of 9 figures could be seen standing in a half-circle on what appeared to be massive fingertips of a massive statue. One of them, what appeared to be a tall man with spiky hair and metallic silver, rippling eyes, spoke first. It appears that the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi has been spotted after all these years. The man said in a monotone voice before turning his attention to another person. A male of average height that had the unusual appearance of having a Venus flytrap attached to his body and one half of his body being a shade darker in the projection. Zetsu, if you would. The ripple-eyed man said. Zetsu spoke to the others in his 2 different voices. It turns out that she has been staying for an undetermined amount of time on one of the islands of the Land of Waves. She was spotted while escorting the daimyo of Wave to the Land of Fire capital by her former sensei, Kakashi Hitaki, and a temporary squad that was with him. White Zetsu said. She was attacked by the squad minus Hitaki and she killed them all except for a single Chunin with just sword skill alone. She was seen heading towards the Land of Rivers by a few people leaving Keisha. Black Zetsu finished. So now the squirt is back in the world after so long. Kisame Hoshigaki, a man named the Monster of the Hidden Mist and a former member of the 7 Swordsmen of the Mist that had a shark-like appearance, said with a grin stretching his face as he heard about her dispatching an entire Konoha squad with just her sword. I can't wait to cross blades with her. Maybe, but it's most likely that she won't stay in one place for long. Konan, a stunningly beautiful woman with blue hair, said. According to Zetsu, the Jinchuriki was seen by Hitaki and a Konoha Chunin that survived, and they most likely reported it to the Hokage. Meaning they will be sending a team to retrieve her when they find her again. It seems that she'll be a challenge to take down. Hidan, the occultist of Akatsuki, said with a feral smirk covering his face. Surprisingly enough, his partner Kakuzu, the Akatsuki's banker, agreed with him until he spoke again. She will make a great sacrifice for Lord Jashin. Perhaps we should ignore her for now. Sasori, a man-made legend for his mastery over Suna's puppets technique, suggested from inside his puppet Hiriko. While this is the first sighting we have had of the girl for over 6 years, we do not know what the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's full abilities are at the moment. Going after her unprepared would be unwise. Pain nodded in agreement with the man-turned-puppet, though he was confident he could handle the girl anytime the need arised. Agreed. Besides, we need to seal the Kyuubi last anyway. The Ichibi is in Suna, as you already know. The Nibi has only been leaving Kumo when she is training or takes missions, so there will be an opening the next time she takes a mission. The Sanbi is still missing in action. The Yonbi we have found out is living in a log cabin on the border of the Land of Stone. The Gobi is still evading any spy networks and is currently missing in action. The Rokubi was last seen traveling around Demon Country with a female from the Tsuchigumo clan a few months ago, but they have been laying low. The Nanabi is currently in Takigakure living with her new husband Shibuki and child, though she does take missions, so we can wait for the next time she leaves the village. But she's also gained more control over her Biju. The Hachibi Jinchuriki we should also avoid until we have more members to fight him, because he is rumored has full control over the Hachibi and its power. Both sides of Zetsu said. I see, Pain said before looking at the rest of the members of Akatsuki. Well, first I want Kakuzu to work on where we could find the Sanbi. Idarayu and Sasori will go to capture the Ichibi Jinchuriki, since your skills will be useful with the Jinchuriki being in the village most of the time as their Godem case cage. The rogue Suna puppeteer and the Iwa bomber nodded, while Kakuzu just grunted as he mentally counted the money he would get on his next bounty. Pain continued soon after. It is doubtful that the Hachibi will stray very far from Kumo being the brother of the Raikage. So we'll ignore him along with the missing Gobi and the Kyuubi for the time being, which leaves us the Nibi and Yonbi. The Demon Cat is assigned to Hidan, while the Yonbi will be taken by Kisame due to his water jutsus being able to cancel the Yonbi's lava. What will I be doing, Leader Sama? White Zetsu asked as his other half calmly watched the proceedings to inform Tobi later on. You will continue to survey the Kyuubi Jinchuriki so we can get a better grasp of her abilities. Pain said before eventually ending the meeting, and one by one the images faded away as he and Conan returned to aim while the others went about their jobs. Land of Waterfall. Within the center of the village known as Takigakure, where the leader's tower was, Takigakure's leader, Shibuki, was currently in his office. Normally, like almost every day, the young village leader would always be sitting behind his desk doing the bane of any type of leader, paperwork. Today, fortunately for the young man, Shibuki managed to finish up early and was now spending time by sitting on the couch of his office next to his once again pregnant wife, Fu the Nanabi Jinchuriki, who was already holding a 1.5-year-old infant, and reading a picture book to the sleeping infant and his soon-to-be-born sister. The infant was a little boy and was almost an exact replica of the young leader, except the babe had inherited his mother's mint green hair and orange pupilless eyes, already making him a hit among the kunoichi of the village. The baby, wearing a light brown sleeping suit, was snoring lightly with its little chest going up and down, while the man's green-haired bride held him with love and affection in her once cold eyes. Shibuki heard a knock on the door to his office and he looked towards the large oaken slab. He had told all of Taki's shinobi not to bother him while he was with his family. Who is it? I told everyone not to disturb me. The door opened and revealed a blonde-haired 19-year-old girl, one Naruko Uzumaki, who just gave a smirk to her old friend. So you don't have time for little old me? She got starts from Fu and Shibuki as the village leader put down his book and helped his wife stand. Well, we weren't really expecting you to be popping by for a visit, especially with Konoha acting up after your stunt in the Land of Fire. Fu told her fellow Jinchuriki in a mock scolding tone. She had read the letter her husband received from Tsunade about her fellow Jinchuriki's reappearance. Naruko just smiled cockily in her friend's scolding. She and Fu always had slight competitions when they met up. Then the blonde looked down at the green-haired baby in Fu's arms, who had woken up from all the movement and was staring back at the blonde with a curious look in his orange eyes and a chubby finger poking into his nose. Hi Chomei-chan, how have you been? Naruko asked with a sweet tone as she poked her godson's stomach. Fu and Shibuki had decided to name the blonde their children's godmother after all she had done for Taki and saving Fu from an Akatsuki member that had tried to kidnap the pregnant Jinchuriki 2 years ago. The baby only gurgled happily before stretching his other arm out towards his mother and father, his eyelids becoming heavy once again as he succumbed to the blessed sleep. Hey, Shaolin-chan is going to be all over the little one when she and Renji finish checking into the hotel. Naruko said as Fu placed the baby into its crib. She had named her child after her tailed beast, the Nanabi, after learning the Lucky Seven's real name in a show of trust. "So if I might ask, what is the reason for your appearance?" Shibuki asked as he had one of his guards put everything in his office back in place while he sealed up Chomei's toys and books into a scroll he kept on his hip. "We've been getting messengers from Konoha almost daily due to you resurfacing. Heck, Lady Tsunade is supposed to be coming here herself in a week to talk about reforming the treaty." Naruko shrugged and followed the husband and wife out of their office. "Well, if you're going home, then I might as well follow you. I have to meet up with Tayuya-chan soon in Kakarot village that is close to here. B and Yugito said they would meet me there as well, so I decided to drop by since you guys were on the way," Naruko said as she listened to Fu about how the pregnancy was going and the green-haired Jinchuriki's teasing about her blonde friend still being a virgin, getting a blush from the young woman. Shibuki raised an eyebrow at that before narrowing his eyes, understanding the hidden message, having gotten better as a ninja to protect his people better after the incident with the hero's water. "So you are gathering the team?" It was not a question. Naruko shrugged as she took Chomei from Fu and tickled the giggling baby's gut. "Yeah, I figured it would be better to pick everyone up and going to meet Killer B and Yugito instead of just waiting for the egotistical bastards from Konoha and Akatsuki to give up searching for me." Shibuki said nothing at first as they exited the building and headed back towards the young leader's house. While jumping along the rooftops, Shibuki looked back at Naruko as he carried his pregnant wife in his arms. "You know you could always accept my, Koyuki, Gaara or Michiru's offer of giving you asylum, saying that you're staying here under my protection. Heck, why haven't the other nations or villages that you've saved done the same thing?" the Taki leader said. Naruko shrugged her armored shoulders. "Well, for one, I told them that I don't want to be a burden to my friends, and two, giving me asylum would cause too much political problems with Konoha and most likely Fire Country if I accepted yours or any of the others' offers," Naruto answered. Shibuki gave the blonde before him a questionable look, then blinked in a bored tone and spoke again as he deadpanned, "Since when has any of that stopped you?" Naruko gave a cheeky smirk to the comment from her old friend. "True, but I didn't have people precious to me back then. Plus I wasn't banished for doing my job and still had a home." Shibuki and Fu snorted as they guided the blonde to their home at the base of the massive tree, sending one of their few Junin-level shinobi to collect Renji and Shaolin later. 3 days later, Land of Waterfalls, Team 7. Team 7, consisting of 2 Junin, an Anbu and a Chunin, had recently made it into the Land of Waterfalls yesterday evening, and after camping out in a cave with a warm fire courtesy of Sasuke to avoid the nighttime cold, the team had continued on its way towards Taki, carrying the new treaty for the 2 villages. Their second objective once the treaty was delivered was to confirm whether or not Naruko Uzumaki was or had been staying in or around Taki, since the Mokuton using Enbutora hadn't found a trace of her in Wave for the past 2 weeks. Meaning she had long since moved on or never returned after escorting Tazuna to Keisha. They were to try and convince the missing blonde to return with them to Konoha for safety against whatever the Akatsuki was planning to do with the Jinchuriki and their Biju. Team Asuma was currently going towards Suna in their search, and Team Kurenai was sent to check out the land of spring, snow, while Team Guy was tasked with finishing an accidental A-rank mission that a team of newly made genin had stumbled upon. Turns out Tazuna isn't the only one that could lie about mission parameters, and Team Konohamaru, the 3 genin refused to name their team after the closet pervert, was currently carrying the new treaty for the Land of Lightning. Hopefully none of the recovery teams would have to resort to using force to make their objectives possible. Tsunade sent Team 7 to Taki because they were possibly the only team that Naruko would trust, slightly forgetting about the report of the injuries Sakura had inflicted on Naruko when she learned of Sasuke's condition, something the Uchiha heir was still angry about, and the fact that the Uchiha had shoved a Chidori into her chest. But as explained by an angry Jiraiya, force might open right as they met her, due to the history that this team had with Naruko Uzumaki, who was originally a member of it. Kakashi Hitaki, who was the Junin sensei when they started as genin, was ashamed of himself for not trying to be a better teacher to his team and having only concentrated solely on his Uchiha student in the beginning. That tidbit had caused him to lose the respect he had from his fellow Junin along with Tsunade and Jiraiya when the Godem called Kakashi to give a progress report of how his team had been before Naruko left. For the past 6 years he has been doing everything he could to fix his mistakes. Sasuke was hoping for redemption like his depressed sensei and being able to right the wrongs he caused his former teammate on his part that caused Naruko's banishment and injuries. He was ashamed of what his clan had become, forcing his older brother Itachi to kill them, and while he understood why his brother did it when he was told by Tsunade, much to the Danzo and the elders' ire. Sasuke intended to bring Itachi back to the village just like he planned to do with Naruko. Though he knew that trying to get the blonde kunoichi to return to a village that treated her like trash when she protected them for so long wasn't going to be easy. Sakura of course has changed very little over the past 6 years, the only improvement being mainly only her skills. She still held a large amount of hatred for her former teammate, even practicing her bukujutsu skills in secret with a mannequin shaped as the missing Jinchuriki. The fourth and final member who was serving as Naruko's replacement on their team so they could have the complete 4-man squad, Sai didn't have an opinion on what he thought of Naruko. The pale boy didn't know the hyperactive blonde personally before she left. Kakashi Taicho, I feel my inkbirds returning. The Anbu said to the team leader, a man many in Anbu, be it rude or normal, had a lot of respect for. Everyone stopped when Sai announced the news and turned to look at him. Kakashi had their teammate send several of his ink creatures ahead to scout the land around Taki in case Naruko was nearby. Quickly the ink birds dropped from the sky and fell into the paper that Sai held out, taking the form of words that only Sai could read. Report Sai, Kakashi said as he stared at the black-haired boy while he deciphered the words covering the page. The ink beasts report that a young woman with long blonde hair and whisker marks is now leaving Taki and would appear to be moving towards the border between the land of waterfalls and land of lightning. Sai said in his usual monotone voice as he mentally prepared himself to take on the missing Jinchuriki, knowing that if they had to fight then they would most likely lose. Especially if the team that attacked Tazuna was any indication, the root Anbu that had been on that squad had been one of the higher-ranking members of Danzo's forces and he was killed by a single strike from what was reported to be the Jinchuriki's sword. Kakashi's eye widened for a moment. Which way? He asked, placing a hand on the tanto that was gracing his hip. Sai nodded and took off in the direction his beasts had told him, leading the team towards their lost comrade. Okay everyone, remember that we're to try and convince her to peacefully return to Konoha. Force is to be used only as a last resort, understand? Kakashi commanded as he looked towards his pink-haired student, the student that had a dark look in her eyes at the mention that the object of her hatred was close by. All 3 of his teammates nodded before they took off jumping towards the direction Sai was leading them to. You know the chances of us even getting Naruko to agree to come back to the village with us are very, very low. Sasuke asked as he looked at the silver-haired Cyclopean, unknowingly getting a glare from Sakura at the show of more concern for Naruko from her crush than he ever gave her. Kakashi didn't reply, he merely gave a stiff nod. It doesn't matter if the Jinchuriki agrees or not, we are to bring her back whether it be peacefully or forcefully. Sai said. His answer from his team was a glare from Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan that he had acquired from the curse mark-induced state of shoving his hand through Naruko's chest. With Naruko suddenly stopped in her examination of Fu's former home in Taki's bug glade. Her eyes narrowing dangerously as she detected several familiar chakra signatures. Kurama, I sense them too, Naruko, Kurama said as he raised his head inside his cage. Approximately 4 chakra signatures are currently heading this way. 3 of them appear to be from your former team and the 4th one I have no memory of. Naruko's eyes widened at the mention that her old team was here, before they narrowed with a feral growl escaping her throat. Of course the old bitch would send them to collect me. It appears that my message didn't get through. Welp, that sucks. Looks like we'll get to have some fun, kid. The Uzumaki woman knew now that nothing would stop her former village from trying to bring her back to Konoha for her safety, as if she didn't already know about the Akatsuki. Naruko gave a smirk as another thought invaded her mind. She could evaluate how strong her old team had become since it was apparent they were coming to capture her. She could see if any of them had actually taken their training seriously over the past 6 years that she had been gone. With her mind made up, Naruko pulled her sword from its sheath on her back and sat down on Fu's favorite natural wooden chair with her sword impaled into the ground in front of her. Her cerulean blue eyes planted firmly on the opposite side of the clearing, where the chakra signatures were quickly approaching. A couple minutes later, Naruko saw that the trackers were about to enter the clearing, though they appeared to be observing their former comrade first. "May I help you with something, Hitaki-san, Uchiha-san? I thought I made my message clear last time we met," Naruko asked in a hard voice as her cold eyes turned to glare at Sasuke's position, startling the four of them and making the Uchiha flinch as he noticed her cold, emotionless gaze. Kakashi was the first to recover from the surprise of Naruko noticing them as the four of them jumped down to the clearing, probably having sensed them while they were still a ways away, already having forgotten that the young woman had sensed him while she took down the assault team. Snapping out of his stupor, Kakashi gave his signature upside, U-I smile. "Yo Naruko-chan, how've you been?" Naruko raised an elegant eyebrow, as if she was trying to figure out what Kakashi's idiot meter was. "Kakashi and my old friends, well, I would call you friends, but seeing how one of you is a traitor who shoved a Chidori into my chest and got me banished for doing my job, and the other one is a bitchy whore that attacked me for keeping my promise to her about retrieving the first one from a pedophile, I won't even bother," Naruko said as her gaze never faltered, though it did turn to take in the others of the team. "I guess I had that one coming," Sasuke thought as he flinched at the hard tone his old teammate had addressed him in. "Naruko, we've been sent on Lady Tsunade's orders too. I have no intentions of going back to a piece of shit village that deserves to be burned to the ground for its crimes," Naruko said in a serious voice as she didn't even blink at the dark glare Sakura sent her way, having faced worse killing intent when she spared with B and Yugito or stood in front of Kurama or Raikage when he was angry. "If you refuse to come back willingly, then we will capture you and force you to come back as a prisoner," Sai said as Sasuke fell into a small cloud of depression, though the former root agent flinched back a bit from the cold gaze that turned to him. It felt like she was dissecting him with her eyes. "I'm guessing that Les here is my replacement, Kakashi?" Naruko asked, getting a nod from Kakashi and a tick mark from Sai. He was supposed to be calling people Les. "Look Naruko, Lady Hokage made a mistake and she's sorry. She even executed and imprisoned several of the council members that had a hand in banishing you. She is willing to compromise for your return. Also there's a group of," Kakashi began, only to be cut off impatiently by Naruko as she waved her hand. "S-class missing nen called the Akatsuki, who are after me and all of the other Jinchuriki for the Biju we hold," Naruko said in a monotone voice, surprising Team 7 about her knowledge. "I already know about them from my sources and I've been doing a wonderful job of staying off of their radar until you idiots decided to reveal me, plus the fact that I've already killed one of their members, though of course they don't know that it was me. I am giving you one chance to go away and never bother me again, traitors," Naruko said as she interrupted Sakura, who was about to talk, unknown to them, sending out a discreet pulse of chakra to warn her comrades about what was happening. "Or I'll use more extreme methods that will most likely end up with you as crippled and unfit to continue your careers or in the ground. Your choice." Kakashi sighed at his ex-student's tone. This was not going the way they had planned. "I guess there really isn't anything we can do to convince you to return home with us," Sasuke said, as he closed his eyes before snapping them open again to reveal his Sharingan. "No, there isn't, Uchiha," the Jinchuriki finished as she stood and pulled her sword from the ground with her eyes closed. "You idiots closed that door a long time ago." Before they could react, Naruko leaned forward with her sword in her hand angled away from her body and she disappeared, uprooting the stone behind her. Much to her team's surprise, she was in between Sakura and Sasuke in an instant, swinging her sword from the side to hopefully remove the pinkette's upper half. Sai moved between the two of them just in time to save Sakura from having her stomach ripped open, sacrificing his tanto, which snapped after a couple seconds under the large sword, and the two Konoha ninja were thrown back from the blast of wind that was distilled behind the force of the attack, scaring the rest of the squad at the show that she wasn't even using any nature manipulation, just pure strength. Kakashi was the first to recover from his shock about her speed, having performed a backflip, and he landed on the ground before he rushed forward to place himself between his students and his former student. Sasuke moved to join his sensei while Sai and Sakura were sent crashing into the large tree behind where the pinkette had been standing, snapping the tree in half before they fell to the ground. "So I guess negotiation just flew out the window," Sasuke commented as he pulled his chikudo from its sheath on his back. "We don't even know the full extent of her abilities yet, so we need to take things carefully, Kakashi-sensei." What makes you think that I'll even give you the time needed to react to my attack? Naruko asked, focusing fire chakra onto the edge of her blade. With that said, true to her word, Naruko launched towards the two Sharingan users, swinging her superheated chakra metal sword. Fortunately for the two-leaf shinobi, Kakashi's previous experience from the last war and being a veteran shinobi came in handy, as he quickly grabbed Sasuke's collar and jumped back while performing one-handed signs. Water style. Water encampment wall. The silver-haired man shouted, and water burst from the leaves on the ground, cooling down the sword and sending up a burst of steam, though it appeared that the defense jutsu didn't stop his ex-student's sword from slicing through the front of his Junin flag jacket, ruining the scrolls in his vest pouches as he jumped back. Once he recovered from his tree-hugging experience, Sai quickly drew several ink birds on his scroll to ambush Naruko, while his pink-haired teammate charged towards Naruko with a large boulder in her hand, using the small amount of chakra-enhanced strength that Tsunade had taught her, though the Sannin hadn't taught her how to complete it, meaning the Haruno could only use small bursts, nowhere near the Hokage's level. Watching as Kakashi dodged, Sakura threw the boulder towards Naruko just as her strength ran out. In response, Naruko merely sliced the large stone in half, unimpressed. She had seen Tsunade and even Shizune do far better. Sakura used the brief moment that the rock obscured Naruko's vision to jump forward, preparing to deliver a strong punch to the girl's face to knock her former comrade out or kill her. But instead of getting the bloody results of the latter that she hoped for, Sakura was shocked to see Naruko merely blocking her punch with the flat of her sword, not moving an inch, while the earth behind the Jinchuriki was destroyed from the force of the punch. "You are useless even after all these years," Naruko remarked with a smirk at the shocked look on the young woman's face, before she raised her own gloved hand, clenching it into a fist. "I watched Tsunade when she made her strength, and that little tap was a far cry from hers, only about the force behind her pointer finger." Everyone's eyes widened as they saw her fist glow in a golden aura. "Let me show you how it is done, Haruno." With that said, Naruko flung the girl back into a tree with the flick of her sword before slamming her glowing fist into the ground, causing the Leaf team to lose their balance as the entire area around the 19-year-old buckled and heaved in a miniature earthquake that had large stones flying up. As she stood to relax, watching her former team getting the shit beaten out of them, Naruko felt several shadows form above her. Looking up as the blonde saw the Sai on the ground turn to ink, she saw the Anbu on a large bird of ink with two more same-sized ones next to it. Naruko stood still as she noticed the explosive tags and moved her sword to her side as she pushed some fire chakra into the edge of her sword as the birds got closer. Suddenly, in a swift movement that surprised Sai, she swung her sword up and around, unleashing a flying blade of fire. Art of the Burning Sword, Taimatsu. Taking advantage of Naruko's current attention of admiring her attack that destroyed Sai's birds in a blaze of fire that caused the tags to explode in the air and forcing Sai to fall to the trees, burnt and twitching. Sasuke charged forward in an attempt to paralyze her with a shock of his lightning chakra as he formed a smaller non-lethal version of Kakashi's Chidori. Kakashi himself ran forward with his Tanto to distract Naruko long enough for his strongest student to work his magic. But none of them expected what appeared to be chakra chains, the same ones Naruko's neglectful mother could use, flying from her armored back and wrapping around Kakashi and Sasuke, with both of them losing their grips on their weapons. Naruko, with a devious smirk on her face, began swinging them around like toys, much to Kakashi's discomfort, remembering this happening when he was first introduced to Kushina by his late sensei and he had challenged her. The blonde slammed the two Junin into the ground several times before slamming them together to further disorient them. She then threw them back towards where Sakura and Sai were struggling to stand. Pulling the chains back into her back with a smug smirk on her face, Naruko stared at the four downed ninja, only to frown as she saw Kakashi's body go up in a puff of smoke. She looked behind herself and saw her former silver-haired sensei leap towards her, his Tanto in his right hand as Sasuke's Chikudo graced his left. However, when Kakashi swung the longer of the two blades at Naruko with his signature lightning chakra being channeled into the sword, Naruko just lifted her sword and to everyone's surprise sent her own lightning chakra through it, causing the elder shinobi's sword to halt at the opposing forces. "You're moving way slower compared to when I was a genin, Kakashi-san. Is your age finally catching up to you?" Naruko asked with a smirk that irritated the older man. "I'm not old," he cried indignantly in his mind. She launched the man away from her as she jumped over his sword and kicked him in the chest, and she landed on top of a half of the boulder Sakura had thrown earlier. "Lightning style. Chidori rain." Sasuke shouted as he came up behind the blonde with his Sharingan spinning as he launched what seemed to be an endless barrage of his Chidori Senbon attack. The kunoichi spun around and reacted quickly, swinging her sword in a wide arc, flaring one of the seals on her blade. To the shock of the Uchiha and his team, the blade lit up and all of his Senbon disappeared into the blade as the Uzumaki spun it. Naruko smirked as she noticed the stunned faces and then the approaching chakra signatures of her friends and a few Taki Junin. With a roar that startled Team 7 out of its spunk, Naruko swung her sword, unleashing the seal that absorbed the Senbon, sending all of Sasuke's lightning Senbon flying right back at the still shocked Uchiha. A few seconds before his own attack would have made contact with him, Sasuke performed a quick substitution with a nearby rock. When the rain of lightning struck the stone, said stone exploded violently, sending electrified shrapnel everywhere, forcing Kakashi and Sasuke to throw up Earth-style domes around them and the teammate they landed next to. Acting quickly, Naruko once again sent chakra to her sword, forming a much larger blade to encase the chakra metal in a massive sword that was twice as long as Zabuza's head cleaver. Though it looked like it would have been heavy if it had been steel, Naruko lifted it like it weighed no more than a mere feather. The Uzumaki then entered a form of stare-off with Kakashi as he stood by Sakura, who was running a diagnostic medical jutsu on her sensei's apparently broken ribs from a piece of shrapnel that had managed to get past the dome as it went up. In front of them, Sai was standing shakily, having not expected this much damage to a team with 2 close to low cage ninja and 2 special Junin level shinobi working together. The root agent was currently drawing several of his signature ink lions, birds, snakes and several other creatures that were jumping off of the page, with each beast drawn until the young ninja had a small army of ink creatures surrounding him and his team. "This is not going like we hoped it would," Kakashi murmured, loud enough for Sakura to hear, making the young medic snarl unhappily under her breath at the slight admiration she had been hearing in Kakashi and Sasuke's voices the entire battle. Though she wisely didn't say anything in the presence of her silver-haired sensei that had made it clear in the past that he wouldn't allow any bad talk of Naruko in his presence, same going for Sasuke. "Where is Sasuke?" the tired and beat-up Junin asked as he looked around for what he believed to be the most powerful member of the team. He hadn't seen him since the young Uchiha had dived in front of Sai to throw up the defense. "Uchiha-san protected me from the explosion, though he was knocked unconscious and left extremely battered. I left an ink clone with him in case she tries to go after him." Sai replied from where he stood without looking at his team leader. "I'm sorry, Kakashi-senpai. I can't keep this jutsu going for long, and so far none of my attacks have even gotten close to her. That, and she doesn't even seem winded from our fight so far," Sakura said with a glare in the Uzumaki's direction, said woman not even caring in the slightest. "She is an Uzumaki, they never tire out like the rest of us mere mortals," Kakashi said, quoting an Uzumaki member he had met in the Land of Demons several years ago as he stood up, the glaring pink cat having finished healing his ribs. "Just like her mother and clan, they have an unrelenting stamina and extremely high natural chakra levels. Naruko's I'd say is at low to mid cage just from the fact that she is taking on 2 high Junin to low cage level shinobi with the addition of 2 special Junin level shinobi, and she hasn't broken a sweat." His teammates looked over at the blonde to find that he was right. She didn't even look exhausted as she still held the massive sword of chakra. "We will most likely need to subdue her now and quickly with an incapacitation seal. We won't get another chance like this in a while or at all, and she is already beating the crap out of us," Kakashi said, his pride a little broken at having his ass handed to him by a girl half his age. The copycat and his remaining students were about to rush forward with weapons in hand alongside the ink beasts, and Naruko smirked as she got ready to swing the massive blade, when a voice interrupted the fight and startled the Leaf Ninja. "I do so hope you aren't trying to destroy my favorite glade." The Leaf Shinobi all looked to their left to see Shibuki and Fu standing on a tree branch, making the Leaf Ninja pale even further than they already were from exhaustion at the sight of Taki's leader. Kakashi heard a twig snap and turned to find the clearing surrounded by Taki's Junin and 2 other individuals. One of the individuals looking like a silver-haired girl that was glaring at them in hate. Shibuki-sama, we can explain. Kakashi stuttered out, knowing that all chances of getting the treaty resigned had just flown out the proverbial window. Explain, Shibuki said as he stroked his chin in mock thought. Okay Hitaki-san, explain to me why a team of Konoha ninja, a village that is trying so hard to regain a treaty with my village, is not only assaulting an honored guest of the leader of Taki and a hero of Taki, but is also defacing a natural monument of Taki's Nanabi Jinchuriki. The team grew pale except for the unconscious Sasuke as Sai attempted to pick the Uchiha heir up onto his burnt shoulders. Kakashi looked back at Naruko, who had dispelled her chakra and sheathed her sword before leaping up to stand with the two non-waterfall ninja. Shibuki and Fu both looking down at the Konoha ninja with their eyebrows cocked. Well Hitaki-san? Shibuki asked as he stared down at the veteran shinobi. What is your explanation for that and why I shouldn't arrest you and your team for destruction of Taki's property? I don't Shibuki-sama, we will leave now. Sai said as he attempted another go at diplomacy to get his team out of trouble. Everyone just cocked their eyebrows at the ink user before Shibuki motioned for three of his Junin to come forward to escort them, one of them roughly grabbing Sakura's arm, much to the girl's protest. Silence Haruno, Shibuki snapped at her complaint. If any of you cause any more trouble in the borders of Waterfall country, I don't care about a possible alliance or war, I will have you and your team executed. That instantly got her to shut up as the three Junin prepared to lead them away. Well, I have to say that this little reunion was fun Hitaki-san. I did get a good warm-up to start the day. Naruko said with a smirk, causing the man and his team to look over at her tiredly. But I'm afraid I have to be going now. See y'all later Shibuki-kun, Fu-chan. Tell Chome-chan goodbye for me. At those words the conscious leaf ninja watched in shock as the brown-haired boy next to Naruko placed his palm on the blonde and silver-haired girl's shoulder before they disappeared in a distortion of air resembling a colorless Hiraiishin. No one is seriously wounded, I presume? The leader of the Taki Junin asked with a smirk as he and his men left the four injured leaf nin after an hour of walking. Kakashi winced as the man jabbed him with an elbow as he walked back towards since his ribs were still tender and fragile. I am fine, Sasuke said as he finally woke up, still leaning on Sai as they walked. That battle was nothing like what happened at the Valley of the End, showing just how much stronger the Uzumaki girl had become, and he knew he would be sore for days as he healed. I'm fine except for a mild case of chakra exhaustion, my tanto breaking, and I didn't bring any soldier pills with me for refuel. Sai said sadly as he threw away the remains of his tanto with a look of longing. I don't think we can even continue the mission on our own as a four-member team Kakashi-sensei, even if we were in our peak condition. Sakura said, adding her own input about the fight, angry that the girl she used to push around had grown so much stronger than she had and had shown it by tossing her team around like rag dolls. Naruko is strong enough to not only beat the shit out of the four of us when we are fighting together, and as loath as I am to admit it, she didn't even break a sweat. You're right, Kakashi said as he pulled out an aged medkit he had received from Rin years ago before she died. That teleportation technique the brown-haired boy used seemed like my sensei's Hiraiishin technique. Plus, Naruko did tear us apart like she wasn't even trying, and then there is the matter of the third person that went with them. We don't even know what she is capable of. I'm going to send Tsunade-sama a report of what happened, though Naruko will most likely not stay in the land of waterfalls after this. Kakashi said as he pulled out a scroll and began writing in it. Once he finished writing, he summoned one of his faster ninja dogs and handed it the scroll in his hand. Said dog nodded to Kakashi with a form of a salute with its paw and ran off in Konoha's direction. With their injuries and the amount of chakra they expended in that fight, it would take the shinobi team a while longer to return home. We need to tell Tsunade-sama that she needs to send teams out to the different countries Naruko has helped or is friends with in case she is headed to any one of them. Kakashi said as he wrapped some of Sasuke's injuries up due to their resident kunoichi being low on chakra. My summon will most likely arrive at the village a few days ahead of us with the amount we have been injured. We need to get back to Konoha as soon as possible to think of our next move before any other interested parties try their hands at hunting Naruko. Kakashi stated, referencing to Akatsuki and Danzo's route. I doubt anybody short of a cage will give Naruko much trouble, Sasuke chuckled mirthlessly as the memory of being used as a portable piñata came back to him. Hopefully when we find her next we will have the full retrieval team with us. Kakashi said quietly, but enough for the rest of his team to hear. Because if we don't, I think things will get a hell of a lot harder. The team shared tired nods as they moved to stand back up and begin their long trek back to Konoha, knowing that this encounter was just the beginning of a long and tiring challenge. The meeting between the Konoha councils and the Hokage had just let out 10 minutes ago, leaving a sighing Tsunade as she walked back to her office with Kakashi walking behind her busty form as she tried to get rid of the headache she had acquired from the screeching of Sakura Haruno's mother for the brutality her daughter suffered at the hands of the demon. I really need to find a way to unweaponize their lungs. I can't believe those idiots are trying to get me to put Naruko in the bingo book as a missing nin just for defending herself against people that attacked her, Tsunade said as she rubbed her temples and pushed open the door, thinking of all the sake she'd be drowning in. Once she found it wherever Shizune hid it, in an hour. Though, I am surprised she managed to fend 2 cage-level Sharingan users off at once, beat the crap out of an Anbu and a Chunin and still managed to get away from you at Shibuki's interference. Kakashi silently walked in after the woman and shut the door after Tsunade ordered everyone but a purple-haired Neko-masked Anbu out. He was still worn out from being beaten up and having to walk slowly across the elemental nations. "Alright Kakashi," Tsunade said from behind her desk as she activated a privacy seal while crossing her fingers in front of her face. Neko taking up her spot at the window to have a view of the entire room. "I know you left out a lot of things in your report to the councils, but considering the letter I received from Shibuki that tells me about a team of Konoha ninja assaulting a highly honored guest of the village and destroying the national property of the Nanabi Jinchuriki, I feel obliged to some answers. It would have been better to try a gentler approach." Neko scolded her former senpai as she hid the blip in the barrier where Jiraiya was listening from. Negotiating was never a choice from the moment she sensed us entering the area. "Not for me, Sasuke, Sakura and Orsai," Kakashi sighed, remembering how she threatened to put them in the ground. She was pretty formal in warning us about not trying anything, and she seemed irritated by our mere presence, especially Sasuke and Sakura for the whole Chidori and rib kicking done 6 years ago. She has shown a varying degree of hatred for any and all Konoha ninja. "How bad is it?" Tsunade asked as she searched for the sake that Shizune had hidden once again. "So much that she threatened to either cripple us or put us in the ground should we not leave her alone. Naruko is capable of using Kushina's chakra chains, evident of when she made me relive my Kushina piñata experience with Sasuke," Kakashi said as he winced in the phantom pain of being slammed into the ground repeatedly, getting the hidden Jiraiya to flinch as he remembered the experience all too well when she had caught him peeping on her and Sume Inuzuka. She has also obtained excellent chakra control to the point where she can create constructs like the massive blade she made around her sword, and she used 3 separate chakra natures with her sword, ranging from fire to lightning and wind nature. Kakashi then went on about how Naruko proceeded to beat the crap out of the 4 of them when they were using their best techniques. Tsunade and Neko's jaws dropped when they heard about how the younger blonde had somehow recreated the blonde Sanin's super strength from scratch and used it to throw them around. Jiraiya even nearly fell from the ledge he was desperately hanging onto, having a waking nightmare about another Tsunade. "If you had told the council that she knew all of those techniques, they would have definitely lost it," Tsunade said as she rubbed at her temples. She especially knew that the elders would have a field day at trying to capture the girl just to gain those abilities. Like Sai had informed them that Danzo was assembling a force for anyways just to retrieve the Jinchuriki in case they failed. "We'll have to inform the entire retrieval team about the techniques, but this does not bode well. Not only does she have my strength and Kushina's chakra chains along with the part of being an Uzumaki as well as a Jinchuriki making her a virtual juggernaut, but from what you have informed me about, her male companion has a technique similar to the Hiraishin and that there is a girl with unknown abilities. She has also gone off the radar with no news of where she and her companions are. We'll have to wait for them to move again before we can go after her." "To tell the truth, Hokage-sama," Neko said from her post, getting the 2's attentions. "Naruko is probably happier outside the village with her friends. If we try to bring her back by force to a village that has used and abused her past kindness, she won't go easy on us, just like she showed us with her former team when they confronted her in Waterfall. She thrashed 2 near cage-level Sharingan users and a Chunin who has pieces of your strength and an Anbu that specializes in seals. Then there is the part of where if she finds out about Kushina being her mother and the fact that the woman abandoned her to the life of a pariah, she might go into a tailed state, instantly enhancing her already powerful strength. And may the gods help us if she does learn about Kushina. Tsunade said as she remembered the look covering the woman's face in the council chambers when she heard about how her daughter had trashed her former team. There had been a look of terror, as well as a small look of pride at the fact that her daughter was so strong. Tsunade sighed and placed her fingers in front of her face and thought. A headache did not even come close to this. Kakashi, work with Jiraiya and form a list of everything we know about the Akatsuki that can be put in a file to be sent to all the other cages, before we send the team out to retrieve Naruko. Tsunade ordered as she stood up from her seat, pressing her knuckles into the top of her desk. Everybody needs to be informed about the threat of that organization and the fact that they are hunting Jinchuriki. What do we tell the team, Hokage-sama? Naoko said while she returned to her post as they felt Kushina and a couple other council members approaching the office. I will inform them when they return from their own missions. Team Konohamaru is currently being held down under fire by a bandit group that is being led by Kushimaru of the Seven Swordsmen, Tsunade said, getting startled looks from Kakashi and Naoko. I already sent Guy out to deal with it. Now you are dismissed. I have a couple headaches coming my way. The two ninja nodded to their leader as the barrier dropped and Kakashi jumped out the window where he was instantly met by Jiraiya, and Naoko faded back into the shadows of her corner while signaling her squad to come back in. Later that night, you're kidding, right? Asuma said as his cigarette fell out of his parted lips. He, Anko and Kurenai sat dumbfounded in the Ichiraku ramen stand by the news Kakashi had given them. Your former student actually beat you and your team to a pulp. While not even trying. Without the use of ninjutsu and chakra? Kurenai asked. She couldn't believe what she was hearing about what she heard to be a dead last. To be able to beat 2 near cage-level ninja plus their backup support was no joke, and if it was one, it was pretty terrifying. Until Shibuki and his wife found us with a platoon of Taki ninja, Kakashi said tiredly, he was still beat from the fight and the long journey back to the village. She was able to use some sort of fuinjutsu to redirect Sasuke's lightning-style attacks, and she had a great amount of chakra control. She was able to form a large blade of pure chakra around her sword like what you do with your knives, Asuma. Damn, that's impressive, Asuma said with a whistle. It took a lot of training to get to the level of control he had, and he of course didn't have as much chakra as an Uzumaki or a Jinchuriki. Weren't her hands sealed so that she couldn't use ninjutsu and chakra? Kurenai asked as she thought of the seals that Yugo told her she had to put on the young girl's hands. No, it just stops her from using the hand seals needed for ninjutsu and genjutsu, Kakashi said. Though, not all jutsu requires seals and chakra control doesn't need them either. Plus, she has gotten better with taijutsu and kenjutsu, and though her chakra reserves are naturally massive from being an Uzumaki and the augmentation of being the Jinchuriki of the fox, she has excellent chakra control from what I experienced with her chains when she used me and Sasuke like piñatas and that large sword blade that we didn't get to see the outcome of. Asuma, Anko and I may be able to beat her in a ninjutsu match, but she has a lot more chakra than either of us do. You, Kurenai definitely have her beat with genjutsu since that was always her worst field when she was still here, but she has the Kyuubi to get her out of it. Guy will definitely have more experience and power with taijutsu, but Naruko fights with seals and weapons that can offset his prowess. Her use with seals allowed her to snatch Sasuke's Chidori needles out of the air with a swipe of her sword and send them right back at us. And I bet that's just barely scratching the surface since it seems she already knows of her Uzumaki heritage. Are we really having this much trouble against a girl who used to run around in a neon orange jumpsuit painting the Hokage monument and fling out clones in a fight like crazy? Anko asked as she looked around at the people around her. She's a bit darker and angrier, most likely due to all the crap this village has given her, but all in all she is the same person, Kakashi confirmed. Except for the fact that she is a lot more serious and powerful than she used to be. I believe that she was holding back in order for Shibuki and his forces to arrive, not kill us. Kakashi said as he took a bite of the ramen sitting in front of him, trying to understand what Naruko and her Uzumaki family members saw in this. Especially since I doubt she wants to be in the bingo book, though she'd be in the right for defending herself. The mission to bring her back is to be taken with the utmost seriousness and caution, even though most of our top ninja are a part of said team. Anko and Asuma nodded as Kurenai tried to wrap her pretty black head around it, and they all stood leaving money on the bar as Asuma took Kurenai back to his place where they'd keep Konohamaru up for yet another sleepless night. Kakashi sighed as he was left alone when Anko saw Iruka and ran over to him. He rubbed his tired eyes and decided to walk back to his apartment, not noticing a red-haired male Anbu wearing a fox mask leaving the roof behind the ramen shop to go tell a certain Uzumaki councilwoman what had transpired in the meeting between the four Junin. Sanagakure, 3 days after Team 7 returned. Wings of clay flew and dived through the starlit desert sky, avoiding waves and massive hands of sand that soared through the air in an attempt to crush the unnatural creature that flew above the village hidden in sand. Black ringed eyes narrowed in an annoyed expression from where their owner stood on a floating blob of sand, as smaller clay birds were released from a blonde long-haired man wearing an Akatsuki cloak and as he raised yet another giant claw of sand to swat the annoyance out of his skies. Not bad, Ichibi-san. Deidara, a missing nin of Iwa, said with a crazed smile gracing his face as yet another one of his creations exploded brightly against the cage's shield of sand. A colossal amount of the cage, Jinchuriki's sand moved all around him in the form of a giant orb in order to imprison him from all sides, but fortunately for the blast-style user a large clay bird swooped in and saved him just before the exit closed. That was pretty close, Godem-san. You won't be leaving Suna alive, Gaara said in a monotone voice as his older brother Kankuro gathered his forces beneath their fight in an attempt to snare the flying missing nin. His older sister currently in Kumo making an open-door alliance treaty for the two villages. Sand formed before him and quickly fired bullets of highly condensed sand at the enemy. Digital shrapnel. The hardened sand flew towards the clay bird that exploded on impact while Deidara safely leapt onto another, frowning as he saw how little clay he had left in his pouches. The city quickly became a massive maze of obstacles as they flew around each other, trying to catch the other in their traps. The massive exchange of bombs and sand woke the sleeping residents who in an awestruck stupor, witnessed the massive sky battle between their beloved leader and the red cloud-wearing intruder. You're pretty good, Deidara mused as he formed the rest of his clay into figurine with a bit of sweat running down his face. He hadn't had this workout since Oanoki tried to kill him. But this is it, Ichibi-san. For you and this entire village. The clay figure quickly quadrupled its size and as Deidara let it go, it plummeted to the village beneath them, sending the Suna shinobi into a frenzy. Gaara's eyes widened at the enemy's cowardly tactic and then steeled themselves as he summoned a great amount of his chakra. Sky Sand Defensive Wall, he roared. Towers of sand rose at the beckoning of the true lord of the desert surrounding them, the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi no Tanuki. It spread itself like a great wave in the sky and caught the incendiary device, causing it to detonate and light up the entire night sky in a bright flash of light. Gaara gasped from the exertion of raising such a massive amount of sand and leaned forward with his hands on his knees to regain his energy. Blocking that is really amazing and scary, Deidara commented with a psychotic smirk engulfing his face, and Gaara turned his head to give his opponent his infamous raccoon glare. Deidara looked up as a massive shadow blocked out the light of the moon, making the famous bomber gasp as he saw the massive encampment of sand surround him looking like the arms of the Ichibi no Shukaku. Shit, Great Tanuki Sand Prison, Gaara announced, and the sphere of sand sealed itself around the mad bomber of Iwa. Katsu. Deidara's voice echoed and the bird he was standing on exploded just as he leapt away from it, leaving a large hole in the prison of sand for him to fall through. As he made his way to the earth beneath them and sand tendrils rained from above, the mouth on the left hand spit of a certain figure and filled it with chakra. A plume of smoke gave way to another bird and he landed on it in a crouch as they pulled away, making Deidara tch now that the last of his clay was gone. As he turned to smirk tauntingly at the cage, the sand of the desert erupted upwards and roared as the head of Shukaku took form in an attempt to devour him and join his crushed body to the endless sands of the desert. Whoa, he muttered, relatively impressed before he took off, the following blast of wind from the raccoon's mouth barely missing his ride. Deidara smirked and ripped off a few pieces of clay from his ride and launched several high-speed birds at the insomniac, forcing him to cover himself with his sand shield in order to not be blown up in the resulting explosion. It seems that in the end, victory is mine. Deidara roared, making Gaara's eyes widen as he saw a tiny clay creature crawling through his sand. Before he could mutter a word or summon his sand to perform his sand armor jutsu to protect himself, the spiders exploded and the blast forced the sand orb to expand in different spots. The sand fell away as Gaara fell from his position in the air with the scent of charred flesh showing from the numerous burns layered over his body. The sand armor that managed to protect parts of his body were cracked and exposed. Burnt, raw skin showed from beneath. Looks like I win, Ichibi-san. Deidara hummed happily as he approached the fallen Jinchuriki, his arm bleeding from where it had been snagged by some sand. That took some doing, mixing detonating clay and the sand around you. You weren't giving me any openings either. You're as tough as I figured, Cage, he said as his psychopathic grin grew wider while he grabbed his bird and reformed it into something that could fly and carry his quarry at the same time. Now I get take you someplace fun. Next day, border between Waterfall and Iron. Naruko laughed as she watched Tayuya smack Renji repeatedly over the head with a wooden tray for messing with her beloved flute. The blonde's heartless abode couldn't bring itself to tell the fiery redhead that Shaolin was the one that was responsible for dipping the chakra metal instrument in the can of bean paste. They had met up with the former Auto 4 member the day before and had learned about the several Konoha teams that had been going around and talking to other villages about her. She especially liked the part she heard about how Ebisu had been nut-checked by her friend Samui and Kumo when he tried to cope a feel with her friend that rivaled Tsunade in the TID department. Suddenly, the blonde Uzumaki stood straight up, dropping her unfinished stick of dango back down onto the plate, making her three companions look at her. What is it? Tayuya asked as she saw her friend concentrate on something in the distance. The seal I put on Gaara in case his life was in danger just went off. Everyone's eyes widened, then narrowed at the mention of somebody going after their friend. Renji nodded to Naruko when she looked at him and grabbed her shoulder. We will be back later. If B and Yugito-senpai get here before then, tell them what happened. As she and the brown-haired boy disappeared, she saw Shaolin and Tayuya nod their heads. 6 hours later, River Country. Near the border between Wind and Rain Country, two figures could be seen moving at a casual pace with a large bird of clay floating behind them with something in its tail. Looking closely, you could see that the person wrapped up in its tail was the unconscious form of Gaara no Sabaku, the Godem Cage, who was covered in bruises and leaking sand everywhere. We should be near the chosen place soon, Deidara said as he rubbed his sore shoulder where his arm had almost been ripped out of its socket by the clay and sand battle 2 days ago. His hunchbacked companion merely gave a grunt in response. He was annoyed with the fact that Deidara's showboating had made them late in meeting up with the others. Hell, not even Kisame made him late when they were partners and he loved killing. Come on, Sasori-sama. It's not my fault that the Jinchuriki was so skilled with that sand of his, Deidara whined as he got tired of the silent treatment his partner was giving him. He didn't like silent situations, always being the explosive talker. You got cocky and didn't bring enough clay with you because you thought he'd be easy to beat, just because he was only the Ichibi. Sasori snapped. He so didn't like to make people wait. The two continued walking for several more minutes, having gone back to a comfortable silence, one that was awkward for Deidara. But it was broken when a roaring noise came from behind them. The two Akatsuki members jumped away and spun in midair with Sasori just barely dodging the large blast of fire that came from behind him. Where the hell did that come from? The puppeteer snapped as he looked around to find their attacker. So there was someone else besides that weird geisha boy following us. Deidara mumbled to himself as he shifted his attention to the wide scorch mark scarring the ground below him. What the? Sasori thought as he looked up when the ground darkened just in time to move out of the way of a falling blonde that still managed to slice off one of his wooden arms with her large sword. Deidara was saved from another attacker as a white metal scorpion-shaped tail lunged towards them, making a brown-haired boy miss with what appeared to be a rod of light that would have surely taken off the Akatsuki member's head. The two attackers leapt away from their opponents and landed across from the Akatsuki members. Damn, Renji said as he released the chakra he was using to make the rod. I was hoping that we could finish you both off quickly with that attack. I guess that was just wishful thinking. How troublesome. Somewhere in Konoha and the Land of Stone, a certain Nara and his father sneezed at the same time. Hey Sasori-sama, isn't that? Deidara asked as he pulled his ruined hat from his head. Yeah, Sasori said as his hat also came off, revealing his grotesque head. Sticking out from the back of his cloak was the scorpion tail. Naruko Uzumaki, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki that has been missing for a while. Naruko didn't even look affected by the puppeteer's words as she held her sword up, smirking as she sent chakra to the seals she was able to place on Sasori's cloak, ready to activate them should she have need to. You guys have two choices. Deidara and his partner raised their eyebrows at the declaration. Give me Gaara now and I'll give you a quick death that may or may not be painful for you or. She said as her aura darkened and the two S-class missing nins shivered as they saw the outline of a massive nine-tailed fox behind her, snarling. I take Gaara back from you by force and give you both a very painful death. Choose wisely, dipshits. Wind release. Rending windblade. Naruko snarled as she got tired of the staring match between them and launched a massive blast of wind towards the two missing nin with a swing of her sword. The two gasped as they dodged, their eyes bugging out at the sight of the massive scar carved into the ground and forest around them from the attack. Deidara was torn from his musing of the attack by Renji appearing behind him with what appeared to be a seal of Fuinjutsu in midair that fired a blast of lightning at him at point-blank range. Sasori whipped his head around as he heard Deidara scream in pain as he managed to dodge with the exception of his arm that blown off by the attack, before he too was forced to dodge as Naruko appeared in front of him in mid-swing. Fast, Sasori thought as he dodged only for the blonde to appear next to him with her sword cleaving off the remainder of his damaged arm. Sasori managed to surprisingly jump away from her next swing with such a heavy body. The former Suna Anbu launched his scorpion tail at Naruko, trying to impale her while he launched Senbon from his left hand. Naruko just smirked as she leapt over the tail and much to his shock, added fire chakra to her blade and slicing through his tail with ease, making the lump of connected metal plates fall to the ground. The cloth covering his mouth ripped apart, revealing Sasori's odd mouth as it fired a barrage of senbons from it at the girl while he watched Deidara play, keep the cage away from the enemy, with his opponent. Naruko simply twirled her sword and swatted the needles out of the air before launching a blast of fire from her sword that slammed right into Sasori's body, exploding into multiple flying pieces of burning wood and superheated metal. Naruko just stared impassively when she saw a cloaked person jump away from the mangled mess. I see, so the rumors are true, Naruko said as she stared at the remains of the puppet she just slashed. You do hide inside a puppet to defeat the weakness of all puppet masters? Sasori just smirked and pulled off his cloak revealing a young boy with wide grayish-brown eyes and short, mousy red hair. Naruko raised her eyebrow as she noticed that it seemed that the man before her had turned himself into a puppet, if the interlocking parts and the hole where his stomach should be were anything to go by. He had a pair of spinning claws attached to his lower back, with something that looked like a scroll holder melded into his back while there was a long length of coiled wire inside his stomach cavity that had a barbed point at the end. In the left pictorial, he had something that looked very similar to flesh that had the kanji for scorpion on it. The two were taken out of their staring contest when an explosion filled the air and they looked over at their comrades to see that their fight had ended. It appeared that Deidara had attached some exploding clay to Renji's bow staff, and the brown-haired 19-year-old had pushed it right back at Deidara by stabbing it into his stomach via teleporting to the Fuinjutsu seal he had left on him, causing the mad bomber of Iwa to go out in a bang, dying in his early 20s. Damn it, Sasori snarled as he pulled out a scroll and showed the kanji for Shodem imprinted in it when he unrolled it with a flourish. Smoke appeared and when it dispersed it revealed a puppet that had the appearance of a young man in his mid-20s that was a foot taller than Sasori. It had black spiky hair that was done in a top knot in the back and yellow eyes. It wore a dark brown cloak with a fur collar. Why does that face look so familiar? Renji asked himself as he studied the puppet. He recalled seeing a statue of an important person in Sanagakure that looked similar to Sasori's puppet when he had last visited when Naruko introduced him and Shaolin to Gaara. That is the missing Sandaime cage. Naruko said calmly as she heard her friend's question. She had been shown the statues of the previous cages and told their histories by old lady Chiyo at Gaara's request of a tour. I see that you figured it out, Sasori said calmly with a maniacal smirk on his face as he took enjoyment from showing off his most prized possession. This is the Sandaime cage. He is one of my most favorite puppets because of how much trouble it took to capture him alive. Naruko grunted as she secretly added wind chakra to her blade. Naruko jumped towards Sasori at an incredible speed as the puppet user was forced to dodge Renji when the brunette appeared out of nowhere beside him with a newly formed rod of light. Sasori reacted accordingly, making the cage puppet lift its arms and several compartments opened. Suddenly thousands of arms launched out of the wrists with blades and other assortments attached to them. Secret puppet art. Thousand hands manipulation. Naruko sneered as she saw the attack and brought her sword up in a slashing motion, much to the puppet master's confusion. "Don't think you can take me down that easily." With that said, she unleashed the wind that had been formed on the blade of her sword, slicing through the massive crowd of hands. Cage style. Iron sand needles. Sasori shouted as black sand burst out from the puppet's mouth and took the form of razor-sharp needles that flew about in an attempt to impale its victims. "Shit!" Renji cried as he dodged his own attacking sand, noticing that the surface of it was a bit more glossy than iron should be. "It must be poisoned." Looking over at Naruko, he got a nod of confirmation as she was scrapped by a tendril, with Kyuubi burning up the poison instantly. Acting quickly, she fired several chakra chains from her back, aiming to capture the two human puppets. Sasori's eyes widened when he saw the chains and he dodged the first one that tried to ensnare him, only for his favorite puppet of the cage to be snatched from his grasp and crushed under three of the chain's titanium grips, freeing the Sandame from his grotesque fate. That's the Uzumaki clan's adamantine chains. That confirms that her name isn't just for show. The puppeteer thought as he leapt back to try and glean information of the two of them, though I wonder why Konoha would toss out the last member of one of their founding clans. "You did remarkably well in dodging the iron sand and destroying the cage," Sasori said as he did some quick hand signs and opened the right side of his chest that launched several chakra strings, while he used his left hand to grab one of the scrolls on his back. Secret technique of the Red Scorpion. Performance of 100 puppets. Sasori said to himself as he unraveled the scroll and released hundreds of puppets from it, all of them armed with weapons and wearing red cloaks. Then all of the chakra strings that were released attached to the puppets and held them in mid-air. "The last time I used this technique was when I destroyed a small nation," the puppeteer said as he glared a little hatefully at the two that had ruined his day. It had taken so much effort to get that damn puppet. Then all of the puppets launched forward, heading straight for Naruko, while three split off to engage Renji so he couldn't aid his comrade. While they were a bit taken back at the number of puppets that Sasori was able to control at once, Naruko raised her hand with her palm facing up and formed one of her signature techniques in it and forced it to become bigger and bigger. "Odama Rasengan," she shouted as she jumped forward and slammed the massive orb of chakra into several of the puppets rushing at her, destroying them instantly much to the puppet user's shock. Smirking at the audible shock on the puppeteer's face, Naruko cut down several more puppets with her sword in what appeared to be a deadly, yet beautiful dance of death and steel. Renji soon joined her as he roasted one of the puppets while smashing the other two with his bow staff. Both of them joined together and began rushing towards the former man. Sasori, however, used his remaining puppets to surround the blonde and her friend as they dove in for the kill. But once again Sasori was thwarted by Renji as he used the Earth Spear Jutsu to impale the ones in their way as 20 chains flew from Naruko's back, crushing the puppets they grabbed. She aimed her sword for the flesh-like object in Sasori's chest, where the puppeteer's only link to the mortal world was housed. Sasori tried to move out of the way of the stab, only for more earth spears to impale his legs and lower back via Renji, who at the moment was aiming to take his head off with his bow staff. Naruko let out a yell as she drove the broad blade through Sasori's chest. Sasori smiled as he stared at the blonde 19-year-old before him. "Well played, Uzumaki-san." And with that said, Sasori of the Red Sand, one of Suna's most notorious missing nin, passed away from this world with the light leaving his puppet eyes, and the only puppets left standing crumpled to the ground. Naruto sked calmly as she pulled her sword out of the man's chest cavity, before she grabbed the damaged core of flesh and placed it inside a scroll along with the torn-up puppet body of Sasori. "Well, that was fun," Renji said as he imagined being able to fall asleep now while they walked over to Gaara's unconscious form. Naruko smirked as she hit her friend on the arm before she knelt down and grasped the cage's arm. "Yes, it was. Now let's get Gaara-kun back to Suna and his fiancée." That's all for now. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments.